Looks like we're back.
And we are recording.
Yay.
We're live.
Good.
Welcome. Bye. Used to work this time.
Okay.
Bear with me while I get the flag up. So I'm having to reopen everything. I went ahead and restarted the computer to make sure it did everything at once.
So my Apple tech says to do restart the computer.
Okay, we're good to go.
Welcome everyone to the South Weaver Planning Commission meeting. Today is September 2nd, 2020. It's a continuation Planning Commission meeting with the Lofts development, Lofts at Deer Run development. What we'd like to do is we'll start off with a Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll continue on with the agenda item 2, which is the continuation of that. So you please stand, repeat after me, the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Gotta get the screen so it's like working for me here. Okay, moving on. As you know, we're looking at a preliminary site plan improvements for the Lofts at Deer Run at approximately 3.21 acres, located approximately 7870 South, 2700 East, by developer Joseph M. Cook of Deer Run Investments LLC. As you recall, the last meeting, we asked the developer for several items, and we'd like to just continue on with that. We started talking about some parking issues and or not issues, but requirements and where it was all going with flow, particularly. Anyway, so where does the Planning Commission want to start first? Is there a suggestion from anybody? Because I gotta be honest, I'm kind of at a loss of where to go from here. I'm a little concerned that there's a process here that requires the Planning Commission to make some recommendations so the folks at the Lofts can move forward. And I got the feeling that was one to be bypassed, and so I'm just a little concerned about that. But
Robert, is there a way we could do this systematically, as far
Sure.
as take the CO zone, just like Brandon Jones and Barry Burton did, and walk through each bullet point in the CO zone, point by point, and just take them logically instead of bouncing over here and this guy's got a concern over here and we're talking about this over here. I think that's because we're entitled to a substantive review, and we're entitled to approval if we meet the zoning, and that's the bottom line. And so I think that is the most logical way to do it, is just to check off the boxes as we go down, just like Barry's memo and Brandon's memo did, and I think that's the most logical way to go through this.
Okay. I don't know if I want to go through it point by point in the zone, because you guys already meet a lot of the stuff that's in the zone. And so
Okay.
that would kind of, I think there's just some concerning areas that is in the zone that the commission either needs clarification, or we need to discuss how we can make that work for all of us, right? So that's kind of where I'm at, because I just wonder if we go point by point on the zone, we'll go around in circles. So that's concerning me. But I have a list. You want to go on my list that we can go off of, point by point, that I've pulled out of the zone. I'm going to do that. I'm not going to be this indecisive guy. So the first thing on my list that I'm trying to fix, Joe, is the detached residential units, building D. The problem I have with that is there are no commercial parts to that building, and the code requires that. So I guess what I'm asking is that something that we can work with you through, or is that an item we need to put in a box separately?
What's that? What's the question? I understand that
the Plan Commission needs to recommend or has to, if building D does not have commercial in it, it doesn't fit in the zone that we're trying to get into with this project.
I disagree. So, and let me just read how Utah Code 10-9A-306 states: a land use authority shall apply the plain language of the land use regulation. If a land use regulation does not plainly restrict a land use application, the land use shall interpret and apply the land use regulation in the favor of the land use applicant. That's us. So that what you're referring to is the CO zone 10.5 and 0.6D. And this is how it reads: mixed use developments shall include a ground floor commercial component fronting all major streets, and are encouraged to include a vertical residential component. Residential and commercial are encouraged to be combined vertically. However, upon Planning Commission recommendation, detached residential units shall be permitted. So building D is not fronting a major street. It has zero commercial value. The next sentence says 100% of the floor area on the first level shall be commercial. But the floor area of the has any commercial value, all of that has commercial is commercial in our plans. But building D is not fronting a major street, and so it has no commercial value. And the statute clearly says it limits it to fronting major streets. So
well, and that's the problem, Joe. You can't do that. You can't take one side and not take the other side, which also says that in the zone, if the zone must have commercial in it in every building. So that's
it doesn't say every
building. Hey, Rob, I'm going to kind of disagree. The CO zone does allow for detached buildings to be residential only.
It doesn't say that. It says the Planning Commission does not recommend building D as a residential only building. The developer would be required to revise the plan because it's required to have.
That's not what the statute says, though, Rob. So whatever was recommended to you is not the language of the statute, and you can't add additional language. It clearly allows for, as Tim says, detached residential units shall be permitted, meaning you can have a separate building that's not residential on the main floor.
Yeah, you can, in the CO zone, it does allow for it under 10.5N-6.
I need interpretation on it, Tim. I'm sorry.
I think very.
Yeah.
Can we make a note of it that we have a member of the Planning Commission that has a different interpretation than another member, and when there's ambiguity, it's resolved in the favor of the applicant.
Hey, Joseph, will you hang on a second and let's just have Barry weigh in on that for us? He's our.
Yeah, I think it's clear that the ordinance allows for buildings that do not have commercial in them. It just says the Planning Commission has to approve that. That's all it's saying. So it's up to you. If you approve that, it's approved. There's no more argument about it.
Yeah, does that make sense, Rob? So, I mean, any building that's not fronting the major streets, so we could have multiple buildings not fronting the major streets, and we have the ability to recommend that they be residential only.
Right. That's exactly right.
But conversely, we can recommend that it must be, it can't be because it doesn't have commercial in it. Is that correct?
I mean, we can not recommend detached residential only.
Okay, so it goes both ways. I'm just saying,
Oh,
right?
for sure. But we have that authority to recommend either way.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not out of bounds.
Okay. Do you want to wait until we do do we want to decide as a commission on that now, or do we want to wait until we do a motion on it?
I mean, personally, I'm okay with residential only.
Okay. Where's the rest of the commission sit?
I agree. I'm not married to the idea of having a commercial component under building D.
Okay.
I agree with that.
One of the things that we seen when we did a tour of all of the local area with their commercial development and their commercial overlay type zoning, there was some residents behind the commercial, but also the those buildings that fronted the main streets had commercial with residential above it. And they did have, from what we seen at the time, some residential behind it. However, if the entire area is zoned commercial overlay, it should be commercial overlay, the entire area. Not this part's going to be commercial overlay and this part's going to be residential. We have to decide that all of it is commercial overlay. That's what they've asked for, is a commercial overlay zoning for the entire property, not this piece here versus this piece over here.
Well, that's true, Wes, but those commercial overlay zone allows for buildings that have no commercial in them if they don't front a major street. So it's not saying we're not applying zoning, a different zone or zoning differently across the property. That zone allows you to have a building that has no commercial component if the planning commission approves it.
If we approve it, and that's what the staff letter said yesterday that was sent out, is that the development of buildings that do not front the major streets, building fronting major streets have ground floor commercial. If the planning commission does not recommend building D as a residential only building, the developer will be required to revise the plan. That was what staff sent out yesterday.
Yeah, that's
And
exactly right.
I see it as the whole thing needs to be commercial overlay,
It is commercial overlay already.
It is.
but it has to have some commercial component in every building. That's what I see.
That's, you're adding to the statute, and it's not what it says in the statute.
That's what the staff recommended to us in their letter yesterday, is for us to decide.
I'm not sure if it does though, Wes. That letter says something different. That
Yeah,
we have flexibility in that. And that it's not a requirement by the ordinance.
Yeah, I think what Taylor is indicating is we have to make a decision.
Yes, we have to make a decision on. That's what the letter says.
Right, as to whether we will take that option, which we have, to allow for those buildings that don't front the major roads to be residential only. So we have that option. They've submitted a plan, and they have a building out of the group that isn't fronting on a major collector or a major road, and we can recommend it to be residential only or not. So it doesn't require an entire new revision. It just is asking us to make a recommendation.
Okay. I'm asking the plan commission, what's going to be their recommendation on that?
So Rob, as far as my recommendation, I think I need one little bit of information on top of this, and it's also covered in the staff letter, but it's a little out of order. If you'd kind of let me go that direction for a minute, is that all right with you?
Sure.
All right, so on the, sorry, there's a lot to scroll through here. Bear with me. I believe it was under the development agreement, where item number 2 talks about the elimination of commercial requirements. And not to say that I want to speak to that point of elimination of commercial requirement. I would rather have some questions answered on how we arrived at the 27,000 square foot number within the development agreement, because I'm not recollecting that was part of the proposal coming out of the Planning Commission, but maybe rather from the City Council. And I don't know if somebody can help me answer why we settled at 27,000.
Fred, can you explain that for him?
Yes, when we did the layout that was attached as an exhibit to the development agreement, we showed approximately 27,000 or more square feet of commercial fronting the major street there. And they wanted to make sure that if we were going to have 74, actually it's now 72, but we had more units originally in that development agreement. But if we were going to have that many units of residential, they wanted to make sure that we had at least that much commercial there. And so we've got that all on the main floors of the spaces that are facing 2700. We have some additional space as well that we haven't been counting, that's space for, say, exercise or storage for residents. But the 27,000 square feet is leasable area commercial fronting that area. And so as long as we met that requirement, we met the development agreement. And so as far as, and the proposal that we showed, the exhibit clearly showed those residential units in the back with no commercial under them. So when it was originally reviewed by the Planning Commission, City Council, that was something that was discussed. But anyway, but yeah, the 27,000 had to do with the fact that we could actually meet that requirement, and we did meet that requirement. And so that was included in part of the development agreement to make sure we didn't like blow part of that out and go residential or something, because they weren't trying to, they were trying to make sure that you had a certain amount of commercial.
Yeah, so Fred,
I want to address, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so to clarify that, you arrived at the figure of 27,000 feet because that was the square footage of
The building.
the bottom floor of one floor of the, at the time, 2 buildings that faced this 2700 East. Is that right?
It's, yeah, it was approximately that amount, but yeah, that was
Okay.
where that number came from. We did not, at the time, we didn't have any additional commercial required. Building A actually has some additional commercial, but yeah, we needed 27,000, and that's where we've got that.
So if I understand that correctly, our zoning ordinance as written requires you to put in about 27,000 square feet based upon the frontage that you have along.
Well, that's in our development agreement says that.
Correct. Okay, so with that said, I think there was a question that was posed last meeting that we didn't quite answer. I was hoping that it would be answered, but we kind of lost traction on it. And that was, what is your anticipation for commercial in this area? Is 27,000 square foot too much in your professional opinion? Are you worried about leasing that out? Because I think my bigger concern is that we create empty storefronts. And that was something consistent that we saw with mixed use development across at least Davis County.
I think there is always a concern with commercial. I think the residential is going to do just fine. But yeah,
Right.
I think the commercial is, we have a contract for about half that space right now. And hopefully, that's going to be able to go through. But yeah, obviously the commercial is a concern, especially when, the economy is in certain areas is really strong. In other areas, it's maybe not so strong, due to the advent of Zoom and Google Faces or whatever. So Google Meeting.
Right.
So really, it's just you know, I think the residential is going to do just fine, but commercials, it could go either way. So
Right,
So-
and I to bring this back full circle to discuss building D, I'm really concerned that we have too much commercial here, and that maybe there's an opportunity to address that. I hate to say the word, but it might be the only word applicable, but a variance, only because I feel like maybe we want to address some of the other residential pieces. And having that 27,000 square foot requirement for commercial space might hinder our ability to have a conversation about the residential component. But that's my thought, and that leave it open to the rest of the commission to kind of let me know what you think.
Taylor, can I
Yeah.
just add some clarification? The 27,000 square feet is not a specific number required by the zone. The zone doesn't actually require a specific amount.
Okay.
right. So it could be amended by.
So if you were going to do any changes, it would be an amendment to the development agreement, not a variance.
Okay, thank
I
you.
think in general speaking terms, I think we would be amenable to that.
So here's another thought. I'm sorry,
Wait a
Joe.
minute. What are you agreeable to, Joe?
Yeah, it sounds like Mr. Walton is concerned, and I'm frankly concerned with the amount of commercial space as well. So, to be frank, and so if there is some way to give and take along those lines with the 27,000, then I think there's room for discussion. Absolutely. So.
What's that discussion look like? What
Are you
I mean,
asking me or?
we're here or there. Let's talk that right now. So, okay, so the plan commission recommends to eliminate the 27,000 square feet. What's the discussion?
So I think
There'll be several if I can interrupt real quick.
Sure.
The first thing is I would like to discuss the commercial, but we've been in negotiations with a company in good faith, and I'd like to be able to maintain at least that. If our concern is being dark, I don't want to chase off a good possibility for having a good commercial anchor. If you wanted to reduce that 27,000 minus the first building on the south side, then the other issue would become the ordinance that allows for commercial on the first floor only, and that would have to be addressed.
And yeah, I think, I would like to be able to include them if they are willing to proceed, but if they're not, then, I mean, if you need something, given up from us, if we're taking out some of the commercial, then we'd hope we can work together to find a agreeable situation where we can both agree on reducing the density of this site. So
Commercial.
Right. So
Do you see the density of the number of residential units?
No, he meant commercial space.
Just discussing.
we'd like to incorporate the commercial, because we do have a really strong tenant, and not a tenant. It'd be a buyer. He would be purchasing a landowner, the commercial space in almost the entire first building. And so, and that's a $2.5 million contract. And so,
we could discuss the building B and building C on the frontage as far as the commercial goes. Joey is willing to discuss openly how much he would be willing to diminish that 27,000 square foot. But the other issue would be if we remove that from buildings B and C, someone chime in here that's more knowledgeable than I on what would be required to have residential on the first floor because I can't just put the residential up in the air.
Well,
I can answer that a little bit. We had a discussion as a staff with our city attorney. We kind of anticipated that this discussion might come up. So we asked him that question. And his answer was it would require a revision of the development agreement, but that in effect would accomplish what you're asking about. The development agreement would trump the zoning ordinance in that respect. And I suppose if the city council is willing to go along with that, and you as developers are willing to go along with that, that's something that could be accomplished.
That would also help, if I may add, some of the parking concerns. If we were to reduce that 27,000 by 2/3, that's going to alleviate a problem that I don't feel exists. And we've got Joe Perrin here who did the parking analysis and the traffic study, and he can talk to that. But let's get over this commercial area first, please.
So can I ask, if you guys were to eliminate that, let's say that's a possibility, do you drop the building so that you take off the first floor and then you only have 2 floors instead of the 3? How does that look?
Correct.
Absolutely. We could even the first floor could spill right onto the sidewalk, which is kind of the point of this whole zone. It says to create a cohesive appearance that pedestrian friendly and encourages travel by public transportation, bicycling, van pooling, carpooling. It's kind of a new urbanism zone. They want people to be able to walk right out of their unit and onto the pavement. And so, I mean, that's kind of what the zoning is for. There's actually a paragraph in the zone that deals with first floor requirements right here. And it says multi-story buildings shall have the first floor with a minimum ceiling of 12 feet. Multi-story buildings designed for non-residential uses on the first floor shall have walls, partitions. Specifying that it's designed for non-residential uses means there's also a possibility on the first floor of residential uses. So, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that residential uses are allowed in the zone. And, but getting back to the commercial zoning, I mean, I think we'd be amenable to, potentially decreasing that commercial zone and potentially bringing those buildings, dropping them down a floor. And maybe we could even put those units, and I don't want to speak too much, but maybe we can put those units in the back up on the front buildings so that there is no ambiguity as to, and I don't know if that's possible. I'm just, our architect is here, Fred. If we could take those units and put them on the front buildings, if we did eliminate that commercial along the front. So.
Well, I think if you're eliminating commercial, the buildings that are residential, just similar to building D, building B and C, change the orientation, turn them sideways so they face each other, make them more of a residential type of a feel. You're eliminating the bottom floor that's commercial, so we go to more of a residential type space. And the orientation is to themselves, not to the major road out front. If you decide that you're amenable to leaving one building with commercial, that one still is oriented towards the major road as required in the zone. But the other buildings, you wouldn't have them orient towards the major road. That would allow us to recommend not having those be commercial on the main floor. So.
Well, if we redid the development agreement, I thought I heard Brendan say that would trump the ordinance and we can still keep them in the same direction. And the reason being, we've drawn this thing and paid to have it drawn 4 times. And I know money's not supposed to be an issue here, but
$20,000 every time we redo
the plan.
Yeah, this is Jamie Blakeslee, the city attorney. I just want to make clear the relationship between the ordinance and the development agreement before we get too far afield. The ordinance does not specify a minimum square footage requirement for commercial. That requirement is located only in the development agreement. So to the extent that requirement is going to be changed, it would have to be changed by an amendment to the development agreement. But the development agreement does not, in all respects, trump the ordinance. when we're talking about other aspects of the ordinance.
Right, which would be the commercial on the first floor.
Yeah, see, the ordinance does require that there be commercial on the first floor in any building that fronts a major street. That's the aspect
correct.
of the ordinance
Yes.
we're talking about.
That's the point I'm making.
Yeah.
The development agreement doesn't trump that.
That's
So
correct.
Barry-
The development agreement is silent on that agreement, on that aspect, and so the ordinance is where we would look.
Right.
Barry,
And that was my point. Still trying to keep the, all the rules of the zone.
So Barry, if I can just ask you a quick question on that. I get the impression that the zone, the requirement to have that frontage be commercial is in an attempt to have some kind of vertical construction with obviously commercial on the ground floor and have that vertical mixed use concept, right? And
Right.
and I get that, but there's other options for mixed use. There's horizontal mixed use. And I guess the way I'm looking at this is, I mean, we know that there's opposition to development, and there's a direction that we're going within the revision of our general plan, and that is to try to not have commercial in this area. So my thought being is, if we can drive towards more of a horizontal mixed use, maybe that's what's appropriate in this zone more so than what is proposed. And I would be willing to consider a variance to having the frontage be commercial on the first floor and allowing maybe a residential component to be on the first floor.
Here's the problem I have, if anybody cares, probably not. I'm okay with looking at the possibility of eliminating the commercial, because that saves you guys money, right? If you don't have to deal with fees with realtors and trying to find all that, plus the build out, blah, blah, blah. And it's just easier to develop a residential property. Here's the thing. I think if you're saving money on that side, you have some room to give up some residential.
Let's leave it the way it is.
Well, anyway, hold on. Let's see
If
what
you
Robert's
did,
saying.
that's fine.
What's Robert saying? I want to hear you out, Robert. Let's see what you're saying.
So
Thank
I'm
you.
saying if we eliminate the commercial, that saves you guys a lot of money and probably a lot of headache. And we just make it all a residential type of a place. But I think if you're saving that kind of money, you have some room to go from 72 down to some number. I don't know what that number is. 5 off that, 2. I don't know what the number is, but there's got to be some room there. I mean, Joe, your team members are saying, "Oh, forget it. Don't want to talk about that." But it's got to be on the table.
In our last meeting, they did discuss doing away with all commercial in the project. Is that still on the table?
Well, that's what we're talking about, Wes.
Yeah, I want to hear from the developers if they want to consider removing all commercial from this.
A redesign, complete redesign.
It would be a big redesign. That's an expensive, because we've got wall height set, we've got entrances, the grading. We've got foundations worked out. We've got. It's. I would be open to eliminating the commercial, but if in fact this contract is if we can make it, if he's willing to purchase this property, which is a $2.5 million contract, I'd like the option, I think, to proceed with at least that percentage of commercial. I don't know. And I think it's something we need to bounce around with our development team and kind of. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. If we can close on this contract, if you had a $2.5 million asset, you probably wouldn't want to walk away from it very quickly. And so I think if we made it that particular that contract, if we can make it, I think there's obviously room. I think there is room on the commercial to decrease the density. So
At the last meeting, you said you guys would consider doing away with all commercial.
I'd
At
consider
last week's meeting,
yeah,
and it's
I'd
a lot of
consider-
people heard it.
No,
Well,
I would consider it, and so we do have a really solid contract for that one space on building A. So that's why I'm hesitant to say, yeah, I want to get rid of it all. Okay,
Sure.
but I think
But if we got rid of it on building B and C, I think, yeah.
I'd consider a couple of units. I think, let's put it that way. I think that's fair if we're going to take the cost and risk. I think there's a lot of risk in commercial development, but I think there's a lot less risk in residential. So if we can balance the two, I think there's space for an agreement there.
Okay, that's where I wanted to know if there's that kind of a space for an agreement. I think we're getting somewhere. I really do.
I think there is. I mean, I think I don't want to give away $2.5 million asset though. You know, I think
I get that. That's in building A, right? So you just keep
right.
Well, Rob, we have a lot of other issues to talk about, so I think this is a good step, but I think all of our other points may actually help the developer understand why they might be interested in going more residential like we're talking about, just because we have a lot of other points to talk about.
Okay. Well, I apologize, Tim. I really wanted to make sure I knew where we stood as far as any kind of.
No, yeah, I think that's perfect.
So, the next thing I have on mine is the access driveway. And we talked about this a lot, was the 36 feet. And I think the last thing I said was, I'd like to see that 36 feet extend all the way to the parking area, which would take it around the corner from along the canal, and then I think probably just right at that parking area in the front. I don't know how to. I think that's important. I just think it helps with the flow.
Robert, I know that's something that's I feel personally that's been something that's been thrown in here just to trip us up, and so I want to just put on the record because there's apparently there's some detrimental effect that's being pointed out here, and I don't know how this 36-inch wide entrance addresses any detrimental effect that may have been identified by the commission, and so that's why I'm wondering. We've been through two fire marshals with South Weaver. Okay, we've had your city engineer approve this plan. Our engineer has done it 4 times. We originally had one entrance that was, and then we added a second entrance because they said the subdivision ordinance required 2 entrances. So we added the second entrance at 26. It's been fine this whole time, and I want to know what exactly the 36-foot entrance. What is that solving other than throwing a monkey wrench into our plans? That's what I'm wondering.
There's no monkey wrench, and there's no back trying to stab you in the back type of a thing. What it is for me is we've required that of all our commercial from as long as I've been on the commission. We've required all our commercial, and for me to go back on these other guys who didn't want to go to 36. And tell them, well, yeah, we like Joe and he was a good guy, so we gave him the 26 instead of the 36. I like to be fair across the board. That's all I'm trying to do. And that's
I want fairness. That's great.
There's no alternative. I mean, go down and look at the Maverick. And we're doing the stuff with the car wash down the street. We required all of that of them, and so I'm not asking anything different from you, other than in commercial we've asked for 36.
And Rob, just along those same lines, you know, I want to know maybe from Brandon, what does 36 feet of width give us as far as lanes, turning lanes versus 26 feet? What can we fit in 26 versus 36?
The 26 would only allow for 1 lane in, 1 lane out. 36 would allow for 1 lane in, 2 lanes out.
Okay. So that's basically our point is this, we're dealing with commercial and we're looking at a pinch point and being able to alleviate some traffic coming in and out of that point. So when we deal with commercial, I think that's exactly what Rob's talking about. We're dealing with commercial. We've always dealt with commercial as being 36. And depending on the amount of commercial and the amount of traffic that's coming to it, that doesn't seem unreasonable at all to be consistent with our ordinances in the past or with our decisions in the past and do 36.
One thing on that, Tim, if we put the 36 foot entrance at the north end because of the commercial's on the south end. Shouldn't we be taking building A and B, splitting them apart and put the 36 foot between those two? I mean, your customers for the commercial.
Your slope and grading doesn't work there. Your existing access where we put it, the main access is where the road and the grading actually works. If you push that access further to the south, you end up with a very, very steep hill right there, which is why we didn't do it. Your zoning ordinance, the default is 12 to 30. Now, your planning commission may have made other decisions in the past on different projects, and that was certainly not something that was discussed in the last year and a half. But the other comment about that whole discussion is last time it was mentioned about having a traffic study or at least some discussion on the inside traffic. And Joe Perrin is the best traffic engineer I'm aware of in the state. Now, he may think I'm biased, but he's on the call. And if you've got some specific questions on traffic flow, he's the one that did the traffic study. He's the one that teaches the traffic engineers that I know of. And he would be a good person to ask those type of questions too, since
I think
here.
The main point I'm getting at is the commercial building, you should have ready access for your employees and your customers going into that building. And here we're going to have the commercial at the south end, but the entrance is at the north end. You know, it's doesn't flow, in my opinion. Means anybody that's coming in is probably going to come in at the north end, drive all the way to the south to go to work or to visit the commercial business in there.
And that happens all the time. I mean, people drive through parking lots and to get to their buildings all the time.
Well, we got Joe here. We should let him address any of those concerns.
Well, for me, this is not about one sticking it to you, because that's not it. It's just about, I got to feel good about what I've told other folks when they've approached this planning commission about the width of their entrance and their approaches. And I don't feel right.
How many entrances does commercial space where Pizza Hut is have?
Little Caesars.
How many commercial spaces does the Little Caesars have?
Commercial.
How many entrances? How many entrances?
They have two.
They have two entrances?
Mm-hmm. One on South Weaver Drive and one on that frontage road that goes down towards the pit.
Okay. I mean, I don't think there's no, I think we should have Joe. I'd like to have Joe on the record, because I don't think that that requiring a 36-foot entrance is supported by any evidence or that's been presented, other than it's been thrown at us at the last minute. I don't know, Brandon, I don't know when you discovered the 36-inch clause that you put in your memo. Can you let us know when was that discovered?
It wasn't discovered. That's just in the code. And the purpose of me including it in there is because that is something that is up to the planning commission.
Okay. But,
staff
it was never discussed in the past almost year and a half, right?
Well, I don't feel like it was never discussed. I feel like we've talked about the width of those entrances multiple times.
Okay.
But
well, I think the key thing is let's have Joe put the facts on the record, the his professional opinion on the record, so we
So we coordinated with Brandon on that because that was something that he asked for. So in our May traffic study update that we did, we provided the analysis of with and without the left turns. The reality is the left turn didn't provide that much of an operational benefit because right now that there's just not that much traffic on this road. I mean, this is, to be honest with you, kind of a giant cul-de-sac that goes to a neighborhood. And so we're only looking at about 4,000 cars a day on a road that can handle about 15,000 cars a day. And so what happens is people can come up and they can make their left turn in a reasonable amount of time. And so you just don't have that buildup. So that's why even the analysis showed if you were going to put it in the left turn lane, the benefit really comes from the right turners coming out. So now they have their own lane to get out. So that's where you get a little bit of a benefit. But the delay is within the operational benefits, and we only had about a 0.2 second benefit for having the separate left turn to the left turners anyway. And that's why this latest study, we just tried to give Brandon the information that he needed in order to identify that it just didn't provide that much of an operational benefit because the road has so much capacity and it's not like you're on a really busy road where those gaps aren't available for the left turn vehicles. Was there more specific?
Joe, quick question for you. What's the site radius to the north of the north entrance there of vehicles? How far can they see? I was looking through the traffic report there, traffic study, and I don't see anything about the, it may be buried somewhere, but I don't see anything about sight distance for that exit around the corner where you've got a chain link fence and other obstacles there.
Right, that's actually not included in the traffic study. We could provide what's supposed to be for a 35-mile-an-hour road because that would be.
Leland can address that. He's the civil engineer.
Yeah, that's usually with the civil engineer and the site triangles analysis.
Well, so then the other question I had is what would be the site distance from Deer One Drive turning on to 2700 East? Assuming there's a 3-story building there. Can you guys answer that?
Yes, we were specifically told that any fencing that we put on near the Deer Run 2700 East would be open fencing. In other words, we're required to have privacy fencing elsewhere in the site, but that particular area at the corner, we were told that fencing needed to be open. And one of the reasons that we were told that fencing at that corner needed to be open was so that you would have no problem with being able to see around that corner when you left Deer Run Drive. And there is quite a bit of different distance between Deer Run Drive and the first building, but
I'm not the engineer guy, so I'm taking you for your word on that. I wondered more than anything. Right?
No, I think.
Can I weigh in here for a second?
What was that? Somebody
Can I weigh in here for a second?
Oh, Leland,
is our civil engineer.
Camera? There we go, civil engineer.
So just our site triangle for the site distance up and down the street is supposed to be 12 or 15 feet back from the lane of travel. And then looking up or down the street from there, our buildings are further than that. So that our site distance is in front of the buildings. We're from our north entrance, we have a site distance of over 350 feet. And it's about 500 feet from the south entrance. So that meets pretty much anything for a 35-mile-an-hour road.
Okay.
But I think engineering wise, we can make the 36 entrance work. So this may not even be an issue. I'm really upset, honestly, because from my team's perspective, this was never mentioned or brought up a single time in the past year and a half. And I want that on the record that we believe it was never mentioned. We talked about the width of the roads, and we had these, but it was never brought up as this being a potentiality. But I think we can make the 36 foot wide entrances work. But so if we need to move on to something that's more productive, so I think Leland has been taking a look at that, but I wanted that on the record that our traffic engineer said it makes negligible difference to the traffic to add a third lane, and I believe it was mostly just to throw a monkey wrench into this whole thing, and it doesn't add to the flow of the traffic. So
Joe, quick question on here about the fence on the side there at Deer Run. You say that's going to be a chain link fence?
No, open. Those are vertical,
Open.
like you might see at a temple or something like that. Those are more looks like a wrought iron fence so that you can see through it, but you can't have a little kid crawl through it. But it's not going to be a chain link because they have a tendency to climb chain link fences.
Right. Because one of the things of my concern is that the enclosure, the fence that's enclosing the play area by state rule says it has to be a solid fence.
I would disagree with that.
That is, the rule on that is R 381-100-9.
So Wes, wouldn't that
Closed
come
with
with
a
a
fence,
conditional use?
wall, or solid natural barrier.
Yeah,
I can write it down, but I can tell you that I have personally had at least the last 2 childcare centers approved by the state health department with this type of an open fence. And so in fact, I'm not familiar. I would be more than happy to look that up and discuss that with the person that wrote it if you want. I was on the childcare center licensing for the state, but I'm more than happy. If you want to give me that reference again, I'd be more than happy to look it up.
It's rule 381-100-9 facility.
381-100-9. And that's R381.
This is really insignificant as to this.
Right, but it's just something, an open fence versus what the rule says has to be a solid fence.
I'll be more than happy to talk to Sarah about that.
If you would, please.
She wrote it, and I've known her for decades. But yeah, thank you.
Joe, I want to go on the record too, make sure we understand. One, the 36 feet has nothing to do with beating you up and nothing like that. Please understand that. 2, it's out of my own conscience that I've required it of other places. And
That's
3,
fair.
I only told you about this a week ago when we had the last meeting. So I don't think I hid anything from you. I hope that's not the case.
I think we can make it work. I think Leland's putting his brain toward it, but
the north access would be easier than the middle one to make that 36 feet work. But that's just something to think about.
Okay, so that sounds like we kind of know where we're headed.
So can we make one of the things 36 and not the other? Can we agree to that? Something like that?
Hold on, Rob, if I can, I'm not sure if I entirely agree to 36. So we haven't really talked that as a planning commission. It's been largely you saying that you like 36 feet. But definitely it's nothing that the planning commission has even discussed as a whole at this point.
Yeah, wait a minute. This has nothing to do with that. Remember we required it at the car wash. We required it at Maverick. This is not new.
And I get that. And I'm just, what I'm putting forward now is I'm not seeing how it benefits the city at this point. Unless we can.
It does. There's no evidence based on our traffic.
Oh, hold on, just one sec.
It benefits safety. It benefits safety.
Okay, so if that's the case, Wes, I'm going to have to ask you to show me where, because as I'm looking at the traffic study, as I'm looking at, getting the civil engineer telling us that all the sight lines are okay, like where is it that we can make that decision as a city and feel comfortable with it to say, okay, 36 feet makes sense, right? That's really where I'm trying to come at this from. What makes sense to require 36?
No, I think that's
with other developers in the past,
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Taylor, that we haven't discussed it just this particular site as as a planning commission, just amongst ourselves. I think my thought is where it became an issue is when I saw 150 students and 20 employees, that potential and the timing to me as to when residents are most likely to be coming and going from this site and children being brought to and from this site and the city in general using the frontage road is pretty close to the same time, right in that 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then in the evening, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. So I think it's a great time for us to maybe chat about that. If the developer's willing to consider to eliminate some of the commercial, but yet they're still looking at the daycare, to me that says, I think the entrance that's nearest to daycare tends to lean towards that 36-foot width. The one further to the north, probably 26 might be fine.
And I get that. I guess the traffic study is pretty clear, unless we have a bone of contention with how the study was conducted. What I'm seeing is that we establish a level of service that is well within the standard that we accept within the city. And if that level of service dips to a point that we feel like is a detriment, then I think we can pull that lever to say 36 feet makes sense. But I guess we're making a lot of guesses based upon what we think might happen, and that's fine. I get that. We can make educated guesses, great. Mm-hmm. But I guess when I look at the facts in front of us, provided by the traffic study, I'm not seeing that the level of service is degraded to a point that warrants a 36-foot entrance. And maybe if members of the Planning Commission feel differently about it, I'm all ears. I'm open to it. But I guess I'm trying to make a decision based upon the facts presented, and I don't have anything to go against what has been factually given to us in the traffic study.
Sure, that makes sense to me.
Quick question for Barry.
I'm just seeing that pinch point.
Business codes, yeah. What's the minimum width for an entrance into a business, commercial?
The minimum width?
Yeah.
You'll have to give me a minute to look that up, Wes. I don't know right off the top of my head.
It says in the,
I think that's in the parking regulations and
it says access shall be provided. This is in chapter 10.8.2. Access or ingress shall be used to all uses shall be provided as follows. Access shall be either, and then it has a little section there, but provided in commercial zones. Well, it says a maximum of 2 driveways for each 100 feet of frontage on a public street. Such driveways to be not over 30 feet in width or less than 12 feet for one-way traffic, provided that in commercial zones, the Planning Commission may require said driveways to be 36 feet in width or a maximum of 1 driveway per 100 feet of frontage and a public street. Such driveway shall not be over 50 feet in width. So 1 driveway, 50 feet, or apparently, I mean, we're looking at 36 feet. So I don't know. This statute is extremely.
That's talking about
the
number of drives in. I don't actually see a requirement for a minimum width. There's maximum width and there's maximum distance between, or minimum distance between entrances and so forth, but nothing that addresses a minimum width that I can see.
The only thing I would see is right here and very 10.8.6 on the code. There's a diagram.
Yes.
F, and it says F is a 25-foot width for 90-degree parking stalls.
Yeah, that's the drive width between parking stalls. That's not really addressing a driveway off a major street. It doesn't have any kind of dimension on that part of it. So
that's the smallest.
I just have to say that the ordinance is silent on a minimum width.
We originally had 25. If you go back far enough, but we changed it to 26 at the recommendation of the fire marshals.
Yeah, 26 feet is a minimum width for fire code.
In some cases, and in this case, they wanted
Yes.
26, so that's what we gave them.
So the planning commission can and may ask for 36. Is that what you read, Joe?
It says either or. It's an either or statement. You have in C, it says access shall be by either, and C1 is 36 feet, and there's an or that says 50 feet. So this paragraph is written by somebody with like a 5th grade reading level, because the two sentences are run-ons. They're incomplete and run-ons. They don't really, they're not clear, and they're very ambiguous, unfortunately.
Okay, and enough with the snarky comments, the rudeness, that's not helping anybody.
I'm sorry, but they're not. If we read, it's very difficult to understand paragraph C. Is my point. They're not written well, and they're very ambiguous and difficult to decipher.
I believe the 50 feet was for a single access. We don't have a single access.
So look, I'm saying right now, the 36 feet I don't think is a huge issue. So if it's going to be something, we're not going to die on our sword over this 36 feet thing.
Okay, then let's move on. If it's not a issue you're going to die on, let's move on.
I don't want to die on this issue. This is not the crux of our development. I wanted on the record that this is something that was given that popped up at the last second, and it's not something we're real happy with. And
we know.
And it's not supported by any evidence.
Okay, you've reminded us. We know. Let's move on.
Thanks.
Parking. Are we on the 164 spaces? Do we need more? Do we need less? Where are we at with the parking? Because all I know is I went 45 minutes to an hour last time, and we never got anywhere with the parking. To this minute, I couldn't tell you, is 164 the correct number or not? Now, I did see the traffic guys, I believe that's who it was, said 163 was enough. My question is, I don't know how that is for the rest of the commission, but I'm missing some spots in that particular traffic study that talks about the employees of the daycare. And so I'm a little confused.
So the shared parking analysis based on the Urban Land Institute, and also what typically cities around the Wasatch Front use. So Orem uses those numbers, Salt Lake City uses those numbers. And the idea is to say that there's a temporal difference between that parking demand. So when the residents are there, they need the parking during these time periods. And then when the commercial or the office space is there, they need them during this time period. The nice thing about the daycare is you only have so many employees. If that was actually more retail or commercial, you'd need it for a longer period of time. But the typical drop-off time for a daycare center is like 3 minutes. So in the morning, you have people coming, using a parking spot for about 3 minutes and then leaving. And so all that parking is actually surplus parking through most of the day. And so based on what we've calculated anyway, based on the number of students and the typical drop-off time for a daycare center, really they only need 8 spaces for the parents at a time. And that's again, assuming that the daycare kind of drops off those 150 kids over the course of an hour type of thing. But in theory, we use the standard practice for determining that shared parking ratio, and that's where the 163 number came up. But technically, you're going to have even more parking available during the day because, again, that daycare parking is for such a short period of time when the demand's there in the morning and the evening. And it's not, it's not like you're going into Walmart for 45 minutes and shopping, and so you need a parking spot for 45 minutes. So that's what that supplemental memo says.
Joe, you mentioned earlier that can you explain the difference between a daycare drop-off versus a school drop-off? Because I think this is a critical point for the Planning Commission.
Well, in terms of the drop-off, it's similar. Schools are just have more kids. You have 1,000 kids at a school as opposed to 150 kids type of thing. And so you just volume-wise have this huge area. But just like every school, you have a 20-minute peak period in the morning and a 20-minute peak period in the afternoon, whereas your crunch time, but it's just a function of the the amount of kids you have.
But I think also you made a point earlier that a school starts at 7:50 or 8:10 or whatever, and this is not the same thing as a daycare.
Okay, so what you're talking about is that temporal separation. You have this peak time because school bell rings at a certain time, so everybody's there in a 15 to 20 minute period. That's our peak time for schools. Whereas a daycare is you drop them off on your way to work type of thing, and that really is spread out, over more of an hour as opposed to a 15-minute peak period, because there's no set time when the kids have to be there. It's whenever, hey, I finished breakfast, I'm ready to head to work, I'm going to drop you off. And so they have their set time, but it's not like a school where they have to be in their seats at a certain time.
The other thing on that, which I agree with you on, is that with a drop off at a school, you pull up out front, kid gets out of the car, goes to school. At the daycare, you drive, you park it, you get your toddler, 1, 2, 3-year-old, 5-year-old out of the car seat, walk them into the daycare. You're not just saying, hey, get out of the car and go. There's a big difference between that. But I think, what the figures you've got for the parking spaces is pretty much right on. The only thing is that with the 27,000 square foot of commercial, that would require 54 parking stalls, which I think is excessive. But that was in the parking regulation that the city has, I believe. That's where I got that from.
But
So
also,
162, 163 parking stalls would be just about right for what is being planned currently.
And let's remember that we're also talking about the possibility of reducing the commercial space.
That's true. That's true.
And so you would offset if you reduce the retail, but then you added additional units, we'd just have to see how that balance changes because
I don't think we'd be adding additional units, but we would, yeah.
Well, like I say, if you repurpose that use for something different, that changes your ratio because again, your shared parking doesn't necessarily have that same benefit, because now if it was, like say you went to all residential, well, you don't get any shared parking benefit. So just keep that in mind that if somehow these uses change and they're reduced, that will change obviously the parking demand, but it also changes the shared parking analysis.
So Dr. Perrin, I have a question, and there may not be an answer for this, but one of the things we discussed last week was this culture shift we have because of COVID-19 of more people working from home, which in this development would mean fewer parking spots available during the day. Do you have thoughts on that or comment? And again, I know this is a brand new thing. We've only got like 6 months experience. So, but if you have thoughts.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So it's kind of a chicken and an egg in that regard, in that if you're saying that everybody's going to work from home and all of the retail and office space is filled up, well, then you don't have that shared. The shared parking analysis is based on a pre-COVID situation. And so if the new normal is everybody stays at home and works and their car are parked, then the shared parking analysis may not have the same validity. But there's no data, there's no support yet to say that. The idea is that this is kind of an anomaly for our condition right now, and that if either the vaccine comes out or something else happens and we're going to go back to that. Because we're seeing a reduction in traffic all over the place too. So that would be the other thing, is even for our trip generation for the site, we use pre-COVID numbers for that, but we're seeing our roads are, a third less traffic on the roads typically because more people are staying at home. So that would mean, in theory, less traffic to the site because people aren't coming. But again, that doesn't address your shared parking issue, right? Because
But Joe, wouldn't it make sense that if people are staying home to work at Deer Run, that they're also staying home to work in their neighborhoods in South Weaver, or their neighborhoods in Layton, or their neighborhoods in Ogden as well? So there would be, I think, it would make sense that there'd be less demand on that shared parking.
Yeah, yes, that's what I say is the worst case would be saying everybody stays at home and works that are living in the apartments, but everybody comes to the office, and you kind of can't have it both ways, right? We have to assume one or the other. So either you're going to have trouble getting people to come to the site, or there's going to be less traffic coming to the site, so less need for the parking for the retail / office portion. But again, there's no numbers to really justify that, which way that's going to happen. So,
Well, and thank you.
It's kind of like we don't plan the church for Easter Sunday, and we don't plan the airport for Christmas Eve, and so we're not really trying to make wholesale modifications to our analysis procedures because of COVID. And so, I mean, luckily our counts and our data collection was all done prior to COVID, so that's what all the analysis is based on. But this, again, your point is, if the shared park, if this is the new normal, would the shared parking analysis still pertain? And the answer is, we don't have data, unfortunately.
Okay.
I mean, that's
And again, I asked that knowing that there isn't a good answer, but I do appreciate your thoughts and insight on that.
Very
So
good
thank
question. You know, bringing up COVID, this is one of the other things that I think we need to look at is the closeness of the condos, apartments. And if we do get an outbreak of COVID or something else, how rapidly is that going to spread through a group that is so close? You know, we've seen it right now up at Utah State, where the students, all of a sudden, 200 of them are under quarantine because COVID showed up in the wastewater of one dorm up there. This is something, I'm not saying we need to look at it now, but it needs to be considered in the future.
Right.
Some way to avoid that.
Yeah, no, that's a what if that really has nothing to do with this development, but I appreciate what you're saying. So, but I do want to say the parking, and I'd like to ask Dr. Farron real quick. I was part of that charter school that's just down the road from this development, and I would agree that in the morning, 20 minutes, parents are come and gone, dropped off. But what amazes me more than anything is the parents in the afternoon show up an hour before they have to pick up their kids, and they're parking on South Weaver Drive. They're parking everywhere. I didn't ever guess that in 1,000 years. And I'm just wondering if that would be the same with the daycare. I don't know, but if we got a bunch of parents just showing up waiting for their kid,
no,
that could be a deal.
It's an interesting point. I try to help charter schools all the time. Unfortunately, usually it's after they're built and they have a problem that they call, because they're kind of protected under the state that they can kind of do whatever they want. And I mean, we have charter schools that block off their parking lot, and so everybody's parked on the street waiting to get into it. But it's again because you don't have buses, you don't have walking for charter schools. Charter school. I wrote a couple of papers on this and presented to the annual charter school to try to help them better plan when they do these things, because you're exactly right. It's a problem, but it's a problem because you have to wait until the bell rings to get out. So just like the morning, everybody's clumped together to drop off because there's this bell coming up to start school. There's a bell that ends school, and people are showing up 20 minutes early because they don't want to wait in line, right? You could have 1,000 student charter school, and that's probably going to be about 900 cars trying to pick up their kids, because you have some that have 2 kids there, but there's no walking and there's no buses usually. And so because of that, they're a problem. But daycares are different because, again, you don't have to wait for a certain time. You basically come in, park, go in. Hey, I'm here to grab my kid. You walk back out, grab your kid, walk back out, and you're gone. So it's because you don't have this set time that you have to pick up your child, and it's more spread out, that you don't have the problems at a daycare center that you have at schools, and particularly charter schools. Charter schools actually generate about 30% more traffic than just a regular school would generate because of the busing and the walking and those type of things. So,
no, I appreciate that, because I wasn't sure if that was the same for the daycare. So I do appreciate the insight.
Yeah.
Someone called Dan Murray and tell him that charter schools bring 30% more traffic to our city, so he needs to finish that commercial development.
I have another coffee shop built.
Rob,
a couple more questions on the daycare center, if I may. The play area, how many square feet is that?
Can we stick to
I'd like to stick to parking, yeah.
And parking, yeah, let's just stick to parking, if we could.
Tim, go ahead.
I just had a question on the same chart Dr. Perrin provided. Just in light of, some of the statements you show, during the day, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., 50% of the residential would still need their parking stalls. And it just seemed like that number was a little bit low in light of, what we're seeing out there. Even absent COVID, I think people are moving in that direction where they're going to be home more, and they will continue to use daycare. In fact, most of the people that I know that are even working from home are still using the daycare as soon as they possibly can. So I wasn't sure about the 50% on the residential during the day. It just seemed a little bit low, but just in light of the movement. My other question was maybe towards the developer and also Dr. Perrin. We're showing on the weekend a 0 or a 5% for offices and services. And right now, I would assume those offices and services would still be used on the weekend. So I wasn't quite sure why it's a 5% versus the normal that might be applicable 100% or on the weekends.
And so this is typically, so the latest site plan that I have, we've been using offices and services and residential. And so offices and services is a different category than say retail. So if you're saying, no, this is, Jimmy John's or something like that, then you would have different percentages. But this is based on empirical data that's been collected over the last, I think it's 15 years. So you're right, as we have this change in COVID, this is not considered that. If we're saying that there is a general shift, in terms of more and more people working from home, then you could do this. Unfortunately, this is what is recommended as the national standard and the national, and what's been adopted in Utah as well, of how you do a shared parking analysis. And it's kind of like the trip generation methodology too. We use national standards based on empirical data, because then everybody's playing by the same rule book, as opposed to saying, well, our Jimmy John's is different than your Jimmy John's, or some of those things. And the idea is to make sure that the methodology is sound so that everybody is using the same methodology. So that's I guess what the numbers are in terms of that, because this considers more of a typical office and services, which are, not functioning like retail would function on the weekend type of thing. And so that's why you're only getting the 5%. Same with the residential at 50%. That's just what the empirical data says, is that half the cars are gone during the daytime, when.
Yeah, so, that would just tell me that, the development agreement just said hours were, now I'm trying to remember,
5 a.m.
to
6 p.m.
6 a.m. to 5 p.m.
It says paragraph 8 is commercial buildings shall limit the hours of operation of all businesses within the development to the hours of between 5 a.m. and 6 p.m. So I think that's why.
Okay.
We're thinking
So my point being, with those hours, they didn't designate weekend versus weekday. And so part of any kind of conditional use and any agreement on this commercial space, based on this development agreement, based on the traffic study, I would recommend that we stick to the businesses have to be only open during those hours, and based on this study, on the weekdays. The weekends, all businesses would be closed. Does that make sense?
I think if that's a conditional use you want to impose, I think that we would be amenable to that. I think.
Well, otherwise we need to adjust. Otherwise, we need to adjust Dr. Perrin's chart. So you tell me.
We're looking at businesses, so it's definitely not going to be a restaurant, because they got to stay open past 6.
Correct. Oh, agreed. Absolutely agreed.
I don't think there are too many, I don't know, white collar workers that
The one thing on this, Joe, that I see is I would like to see the hours extended instead of 5 o'clock in the morning to say 5:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Mainly because a lot of people, especially people in the medical profession, have to be to work at 5 o'clock. So, and they're wanting to drop their kids off so they can be at work. So if that was extended a little bit earlier, and a lot of people don't get off work till 6, and if that could be extended an hour longer, I think that would be fit with what the needs of the people are a lot more than 5 in the morning to 6 at night. I'm just saying that.
Fred, how are you seeing daycares? Are they open on the weekends? Do you know? You're on mute.
You're on mute, Fred.
That's excellent.
The ones that I have seen are typically closed on the weekends. For example, the one that we've been working with, I've been to their parking lot on a Saturday and there's not a lot of people there on the weekends. That doesn't mean that that's entirely the case, but that would certainly be something that would be asked during a conditional use approval for a particular business going in there. And I do agree that we were looking at during the week as far as the parking ratios. And so if we had a childcare center that had 150 employees on a weekend, that's going to work differently as far as our shared parking ratios. We were not planning on that. Joe can correct me if I'm wrong, but we
just need to know what hours you guys are telling us your businesses are going to be open and running, so that I can have a traffic study that's accurate, that matches. That's all.
We can always, I was going to say, we can always update this analysis, because the nice thing is if you take a look at the weekends, we have a fair amount of room to spare when you consider, particularly if it's just the daycare that you're saying might be open on the weekends, because you're looking at employee parking, and then you're looking at, again, that typically we need about 8 spots for the drop-off time because of the turnover is so high. And so we have a fair amount of spaces extra. If you do the 164 spaces, if you look at the weekend in table 3 of that analysis, we have at least 18 spaces from midnight to 7 a.m. that's probably not when the peak time for the daycare is, but we only are using 115 of the site and during the 7 to 6 p.m. on the weekend. And so that gives us, almost 50 spaces. What is that, 48 maybe? Spaces that are still going to be surplus if we're building 164.
And then if they extend the business hours, later than the development agreement, that also is going to affect your numbers.
Yes.
Currently, the daycares that I've looked at, they typically have them. They're typically available for somebody to bring their child around 6 in the morning. It doesn't mean that there aren't. They can't make arrangements earlier. You mentioned medical or something, but typically 6 in the morning is, and 6 o'clock at night is very common. I have seen some at 6:30. In this case, we stopped it at 6 for purposes of shared parking, and the person that we're looking at for the childcare was willing to live with the 6 o'clock. So if it was extended to say 6:30 or something, I don't think they would object. But that's they were okay with the hours that were in the development agreement.
Okay. I just, if you're going to extend that, then I'm going to need a traffic study that actually matches what we're talking about.
Good.
Yeah, so the time periods that we've identified in the parking analysis, again, those are set based on the empirical data, so it doesn't give us a per hour. But what we can do is say, hey, if the daycare is going to extend, then actually we need a higher percentage, and we just have to come up with what we thought the percentage was or the number of spaces to identify that. If that kind of makes sense, it's not like we can say, oh, we're going to go till 8 o'clock. Well, that's part of this one and part of that one. So how much of that square footage or how much of that, the daycare portion would go into that, and we would have to just manually adjust those percentages and just make sure that everybody felt comfortable with that. So it's more of a customized parking analysis as opposed to the standard shared parking analysis.
Sure. Yeah, I just know that, the later you get in the day, then we're using up 100% of the residential.
Correct.
So that's what we're looking at, is how many parking stalls we need.
On weekends, we're seeing what percentage of people leaving the site, Joe?
The percentage of people that are gone, you mean from the residential portion?
Yeah. So, if somebody wanted to run in and they had a little project they got to work on in their office on a Saturday, what's available to them? According to the study, I guess.
Right. So right now, let me get that up here. So right now, midnight to 7 on the weekend, we expect 100% of the residential. And then from 7 to 6 p.m., about 75% of the residential, and then also from 6 p.m. to midnight. So you only get really a 25% reduction in your residential. But what that gives us is from midnight to 7 a.m., again, if we're doing 164 spaces, that gives us 18 leftover spaces, if you will, for commercial type of thing. And then from 7 to 6 p.m., we're looking at about 110 for the residential. And so that gives us, the 54 spaces kind of for the office retail, daycare type of thing. And then from 6 p.m. to midnight, we're at about 110 spaces for the residential. And so that would give us, compared to the 164, again, 54 spaces of leftover parking for the retail, office, daycare.
Okay.
So your critical time is in the morning, actually, when everybody's there for the residential. And so we would only have about the 18 spaces available for the non-residential development.
Okay, so I think the parking is there. I think that's maybe if you have any other questions, but I think if we can work on.
Well, I'm going to let Rob lead this meeting rather than you, Joseph. So.
All right.
Thank you. Are we comfortable with the parking? I'm not sure.
I
am, but it seems like it doesn't matter what I think anymore. So, anyway, let's talk about the architecture review. If we want to move on, because I think we talked about flow and that.
No, I mean, I don't know if each one of us on the planning commission have an opinion on how many parking stalls now that or if we have any other questions.
Well, and the thing is you want to see another parking analysis, which I'm okay with. So I don't know if we can even answer that question about parking.
Well, only if they're planning on changing hours from what we're seeing on the traffic study. If they're good with their businesses just operating Monday through Friday, then the parking study seems, efficient.
Are you okay with those businesses only operating then? I think that.
Personally, no, I'm not. If you're asking me.
I am asking you. I'm saying.
Yeah.
I agree, and I think Wes was trying to say that as well. It's too limiting. I mean, how are we going to get some good commercial in this town if we're limited it till 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, whatever the number is?
I agree. Yeah, I think there's an issue there that when you would want to have commercial that's actually operating, your residents are also going to be home.
Are you talking about on a Saturday or between the hours of 5 a.m. and 6 p.m.?
I was thinking more evening, but 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. I think we're a little tight with the 27,000. But if it's just the daycare, I think we're closer on the 164 spaces. That seems like it would work with the shared and just the daycare.
Okay, how about this? We wipe out the other 2/3 of the daycare. We keep the daycare. We wipe out the other 2/3. I don't think anyone would contest. Maybe they would, but that our parking would be satisfactory with those 164 stalls. Maybe I'm shooting from this.
Different than everybody else. I'm not completely married to the idea of getting rid of the commercial, and so I understand what you're saying. But I'm a little concerned that we're trying to cut off these hours. And what kind of businesses are we going to get in South Weaver? Not that we're not open to all businesses, but what kind of businesses are going to generate any kind of real tax revenue for the city if they're really only open from 5 a.m. to 6? You're not going to get any. But if you get a restaurant or something like that, then there's some small opportunities for income for the city in the tax revenue. And so
these are office, I think.
Yeah, offices, but I mean, I don't know, some kind of small retail. I have no idea, but I can tell you, I love an insurance office. It's nice, but they don't generate much tax revenue for the city.
And I don't think that's really consideration. I mean, necessarily for approval process.
Right. No, but I'm just saying we got to decide where we're at with the time and if we're actually having commercial before we can even mow out the rest. Is what I can see.
Well, the study's based on offices and services, so it's just your 8 to 5.
I understand.
That's correct for the parking analysis. Yes.
I understand what you're saying. Is that where we want to stick? That's what I'm asking.
I mean, it's already agreed to. It's already agreed. It's limited to the hours of 5 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Well, and so is the commercial space, but we already talked about monkeying around with that development agreement, right?
Yeah.
So I think everything's on the table if that's the case, right?
Well, I think we stick to offices and services. I don't see this as being, generating any retail in that area. Anyways, our general plan is looking at having this be all residential. So
I agree, but what I'm saying, Tim, is what is the city gaining by well, that's not the word I want to use. Gaining's not the word. What does the residents get as a service that helps them in this kind of a environment? Because it'd be South Weaver citizens that use this kind of a office space, right? And so
maybe
where they would personally have their business, but they would go there as their insurance advisor would be there or something like that. I don't mean to get off the subject, but I'm hung up on if we're even going to do commercial, what's it going to look like? Does that affect the parking spaces? Yes, it does. And if we're going to do commercials, is the hours that we kind of set up the ones that are going to work for us?
I think we're getting there.
If someone can answer that for me, I'd be a happy guy.
Well, and I think that's why the general plan pushes for residential in this area, Rob. So
okay, it pushes for residential area. But right now the general plan as it sits, and with a commercial overlay, that's a commercial spot.
I do have a comment on that. You go back about 3 years, and one of the reasons that the zone was changed from what it was to what it is because the past owners had a really hard time figuring out how to put retail there and get it to work. If you've got mixed use, you've got people that are perhaps looking for maybe a nail salon or someone to cut their hair, or a copy shop, not coffee, but copy, as in running a bunch of paper, printing things out. I know the last time I was really close to the site looking for something to be printed out, like an Alpha Graphics or something, there was one, but it was a long ways away. So there, you may have one, but there, a lot of those types of services do work well in the hours that are currently set. And so obviously you have the ability of looking at possibly changing that development agreement in the future. But one of the reasons that we didn't say it's only going to be offices, but it's going to be office type hours, was that shared parking would work, but it would add some additional flexibility so that we could have some of these other services. And some of those are going to key off of two things. One, the childcare center is going to act as an anchor, and then the residential community will act as an anchor as well. And that's the intent behind the commercial. But as far as whether you're going to have a bike shop or something there, I don't know. We're trying to create the spaces so they're flexible enough so that they don't sit dark.
Sure. And you're right. You're right. Blight is everything. We don't want blight.
So Rob, I,
Yeah, yeah.
I kind of like where we're going with eliminating a good portion of the commercial. I'm, just like everybody else, I would love to see my property taxes go down if we get more commercial in here to supplement it. I just don't see this being a good area for commercial. And we've recognized that in the general plan. I also like the fact if we get rid of the commercial, the buildings are going to be lower. I like that. And I think the residents like that too. But parking, I think I'm with Tim that if all we have is the daycare and nothing else, I think the parking's close. Again, I'm not a parking or a traffic engineer or anything like that, but the numbers and the discussion I'm hearing seems that will work a little better. I hope we're not wrong, but that's kind of where I'm thinking right now. I just wanted to.
Hey, Gary, can we ask Jamie if we put together a list of bullet points tonight to amend the development agreement? What, I'm just throwing this out there. We if we were able to move the commercial off the other two buildings and bring some of that other residential up to the front. I'm just trying to, I think we could solve a lot of these issues by reducing the density, the impact of these things. And so I'm wondering what an addendum to the development agreement would look like as far as when we're referring to some of these issues in the city code, because there are some things that need to be addressed, obviously, in the city code. We're amenable to, I think, I've been speaking offline with a couple of the other investors and just to working something out where everybody gets a win here. And so we want to get on down the road. We want to solve any perceived parking issues and make this project as attractive as possible. And so I guess, Jamie, my question is how do we deal with the fronting the major road clause and what was the other one? I think parking is going to be it's going to be a less intense use, so parking I don't think is going to be an issue. So how do we deal with, I guess that's the big one, is fronting the major road, commercial on main floor.
I'll defer to the chair, Mr. Osborne. Do you want an answer to that question?
Yes, please.
So I think one of the issues you're going to hit with the development agreement is that typically development agreements are not legislative actions. And right. In this case, I think if what you're intending the development agreement to do is to become a legislative instrument and supplant code where code exists, then the development agreement would have to go through the public hearing requirements under LUDMA to be amended and to have that type of an effect. And I think unfortunately what you're dealing with on the building that fronts the major street is a requirement that there be some commercial space, and that's a code requirement, not a development agreement requirement.
So Jamie, can I just jump in here and ask, if they were to turn the buildings like Tim suggested, they're no longer fronting it, does that change it?
Is it that you would have no building fronting?
You would have building A front and the other two, if they were turned such that the front of the building was not facing the road, does that change it?
Well, Brandon, read with me. I'm at 10.5N-6, paragraph D. And it says mixed-use development shall include a ground floor commercial component fronting all major streets. I read that to mean that a mixed-use development must include ground floor component, and that ground floor component must front all major streets.
So both. So the building in the back currently, as was discussed earlier, only has residential. And there was the clause that allowed for the planning commission to make a recommendation that they were okay with it being detached residential. Could those buildings, building B and C, become detached if they were not fronting 2700?
I believe that's permissible. What I'm having a hard time understanding is whether the code would allow for the entire development to shed any commercial uses.
So we would need to take it off the fronting the main road and have whatever's fronting the main road have 100% commercial.
I think they were talking about still keeping the daycare in building A. So that would still have commercial, but buildings B and C potentially would not. You don't need to, I mean, maybe I'm speaking out of turn. I just was curious if that concept works.
I don't see why it wouldn't, because building D, what are we talking about? What qualifies as fronting? You know, building D, we could say it fronts just because it's set back 200 feet or it's only 10 feet from the road. Is that the definition of fronting, or the orientation of the building? So those that are nearest to the road, if the orientation is not fronting that road, you can easily define the orientation of the building as the front. You know, so you can set it back. I don't even know that setting it back a certain number of feet defines the fronting.
Unfortunately, Barry, our setbacks are defined in the code as well.
Yes, they are. In this instance, they have a maximum setback of 10 feet from the front property line. That's
all buildings.
But that's not all buildings.
No, but the ones that front the street, that's true.
Right.
You know, fronting is...
Building D doesn't sit 10 feet from the property line.
No, you're correct. Wow. We're entering into some gray area because let's take a home, for instance, a residence. If they put the front door on a side of the building that does not face the street, that doesn't change the front yard orientation. The front is still the side that's abuts the street. So you're talking about changing the orientation of the building and whether or not that changes frontage. Boy, that's a good question. And I don't know that there's really an answer in the code, because we could have, you think of major commercial developments where you've got multiple buildings on a site, and certainly not all of them face a street.
Mm-hmm.
What's the frontage?
Agreed.
Yeah.
But hence, that's why you have a development agreement. Then all parties say, yeah, this is what we agree to. Yeah. Because then it takes the gray and it makes it black and white.
Yeah.
I do agree with you there, Tim, that to the extent everybody has questions about what frontage means and which of the buildings front the major street, if the development agreement were amended to speak to that, then it could be done.
Clarify.
Sure.
Can you reiterate that, please, Jamie? If we had a fronting, what were you saying?
Well, I think what Tim's proposing to kind of talk through the entire scenario, and Tim, help me if I misunderstand it, is that you presently have a site plan where one of the buildings is oriented to very clearly front or run parallel to the major street. And if the site plan were to be reoriented where you had the shorter width of each building along that major street, then there would be a question about which of the buildings, if any, front the major street. And I think what he's proposing is that the development agreement may be a vehicle to resolve that question. Is that right, Tim?
Yes, although I don't know that you necessarily need to decide that the major width is the front. I think it's the orientation could be spelled out. You could still have the building be the same shape or position, but you spell out in the development agreement that the frontage or the orientation is designated a certain direction, and so it's not considered commercial, and we can recommend it be 100% residential.
Okay, that's helpful. The one sentence to consider in light of that is the first one in subparagraph D, where it says shall include a ground floor commercial component fronting all major streets. And there's a question in my mind whether the requirement is that the building or the commercial component front the street.
Yeah, and to me, it's the commercial component fronts the street, which is what we're asking for on building A.
Yeah.
It seems the orientation would be towards the major street. And of course, again, you would define that in the development agreement.
I read that the same way.
The ground floor commercial component, which would be, okay.
Okay.
Let's make that happen. And that would reduce our parking issue. Reorient I'm just taking notes here, but reorient the other buildings so they're not oriented toward the street, so we can reduce the commercial.
Well, if I heard Tim and Jamie correctly there, that's not necessary to reorient those buildings because it's only the commercial component that has to be oriented towards the street. So if there is no commercial component, you don't have to worry about it.
Okay.
Orientation. Is that right?
Oh, remember, Barry, you also have to read the final sentence of paragraph D, which is 100% of the floor area on the first level shall be commercial.
Shall be commercial. Yes, I know.
It's running the major street.
Yes, you would. I mean, you would eliminate entrances off of that side of the building.
Say that again, Tim. You would eliminate the entrances off of the street side of the building and orient.
That was my thought, just as far as the orientation, that you would orient the entrances more towards the sides or the rear, internalize.
Jamie, let me ask you this. It seems like there's a little bit of a problem there. I mean, the ordinance says, however, the planning commission, upon planning commission recommendation, detached residential units shall be permitted. The immediate next sentence is 100% of the floor area on the first level shall be commercial. It doesn't say the floor area of buildings that front a major street. It just says 100% of the floor area. So it appears to me that if the planning commission recommends a detached residential unit, that last sentence doesn't apply.
Not to the detached residential unit, I agree. without question, there are some things in this subparagraph that we need to figure out. And the rule of interpretation when you're reading something like this would be to favor an interpretation where you can find some cohesion among the various sentences. And so the way, for me at least, that makes sense and there's some cohesion is that the final sentence, standing alone, is referring to the ground floor, the building with the ground floor commercial component, not all of the buildings within the development.
That's the way I read it as well. So that
Again,
kind of negates this whole issue about reorienting buildings.
true.
Yeah.
True. Again, the development agreement's going to clarify the gray.
Yeah.
Because you have parties to an agreement, and
Right.
so you have gray, and you have parties to an agreement that clarifies.
Yeah.
It's a very great thing, actually, when we have this gray. Then you don't run down the road and somebody builds something or occupies something and they read the same paragraph D differently.
Yeah.
So we can clarify what we interpret paragraph D to mean by something that is
right.
contrary to a provision in paragraph D without making the development agreement a legislative act and walking through the letter.
I think Jamie hit on something that was referring to interpretation. The land use authority shall apply the plain language of the land use regulations. If a land use regulation does not plainly restrict the land use application, the land use authority shall interpret to apply the land use regulation to favor the land use applicant. And where there's ambiguity, which there clearly is, we've been going around this paragraph for probably 3 hours now, including last meeting. There's ambiguity in what this means, and so the statutory interpretation, according to Utah Code 109A 306, allows it to be interpreted in our favor, I guess is what I'm saying.
That's accurate as a general statement, but I still think we would have to pinpoint exactly what the ambiguity is. I think what Tim has just walked through is a plausible, unambiguous interpretation of what that subparagraph means. It's cohesive when you look at it that way.
So let's see if we can boil this down to some 2 or 3 items where we can find something to recommend to the city council and move forward. And if we could do that pretty quickly, I think.
Wait a minute.
There's more issues
first.
Okay,
right?
that's fine.
And the process is one. Let's get the planning commission to decide that this is the preliminary we want to send back for final to come back to us again, and let's clean that up, right? I would like to get as close to what I think the city council would approve. I can tell you right now, the way this sits, the city council won't even approve this. But so let's get it so all the votes are worked out, so you don't have to keep going back and forth. Let's get to where we think it's got to be.
Does Mr. Halverson have any input on what? I don't know if we want to get his input, or if we can even on the tone of city council if we were to do some of the things we're discussing tonight.
What was the question?
Is it possible to get a reading at all? I don't know if Mr. Halverson has a pulse on the city council or doesn't about what would or wouldn't be,
Well, I think the plan commission has a pretty good idea, and
okay.
And this is our body. It's not the city council's body, and Mr. Halverson's great, but he's kind of agreed to stay out of it until it gets to their body, right? And so, but I think we kind of have a feel where it's at, and quite frankly, I think Tim's headed down the right road, and trying to figure out, okay, what's the language? What does it mean? What does this got to look like? And let's write it up. And if it requires us to do another development agreement, let's decide what that is and can go forward. Is that what you're thinking, Tim? Or
Yeah, but we got to keep moving. We still have more items. So if we're kind of in some agreement on maybe on some things at this point, but let's just keep going down the list, because I think all of us have a few items on our list that we want to make sure addressed tonight.
Sure.
So-
Yep, I agree.
Okay.
So I think we're in agreement that we're not in agreement with what to do with this development agreement. Wow, that's a lot of work.
Well, I think we have some good thoughts, so, and we might be able to finalize them before we're done here, but let's just keep moving along with everybody on the commission to make sure all our questions are answered. And then there's other things. There's not just traffic and parking and
Right.
eliminating commercial space.
I agree with you. I agree with you. And here's
Okay.
my thought process on this whole thing is keep working through all these issues with Joe and his team. And then once we get through the issues, then let's talk about it amongst the commission, decide
Right.
what we're going to write up and recommend for, and go forward. That's kind of where I've been trying to head. So if that's
Right.
okay with everybody, I'd like to do that. And the next thing I have here is an architectural review and provision limitation design guidelines. You want to tackle that first, Tim? You had some thoughts about that, I know.
I mean, I don't want to control everything.
Go ahead, Tim.
I'll give it to you too, because I'll piggyback on what you thought.
So on the design guidelines, let me, gosh, I've got too many notes.
Tim, I just want to step in and say something. I emailed all of you guys the very beginning of this meeting. The Lofts sent me a few images, 3D images that I did email to all of you guys. It's also in the file on the Google Drive.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I saw some of those images. Appreciate Fred providing those. So on the design standards, just I had some thoughts, and I'm sure everybody else has some also. But as a planning commission member, I feel like under the CO zone, I have a directive, and some of the main items that stuck out to me is if I'm going to recommend this type of development to be applicable in a CO zone, it needs to promote a number of things. And so I run through those things, trying to identify that it's promoting those things. Pedestrian friendly, so walking areas, carpooling, cycling, public transport, arcades, roofs, coverings, awnings, distinctive entrance openings, architectural features with prominent finishes, visual interest and attractive. So as I look at this building, I don't see a gathering of pedestrians, spaces for them to get together. I don't see any of that identified in the current plan that's presented for us. I don't worry too much about on the residential side, but on the commercial spaces, I think that needs to be an emphasis, and I'm not seeing it. We have a directive that it says under there that this development should provide give us a sense of harmony with the neighborhood. This particular style doesn't necessarily fit in with this neighborhood. I'm not opposed to, some of the contemporary and modern styles in architecture, but I don't see this tailored for the harmony of this neighborhood where it's being placed, nor do I get a feeling of small town South Weaver when I look at these buildings. So I feel like there's a real disconnect as far as the architecture of the look of these buildings and the directive that we have on the Planning Commission. One of the big emphasis is this should fit in with the neighborhood. One of my big questions that I've yet to have answered is this site is being raised on the back side with a 14-foot retaining wall. That doesn't make sense to me how it fits in with the surrounding neighborhood. I understand that it gains them a flat surface to build on top of, but I don't think it needs to be a flat surface to build on top of, especially if it's supposed to coordinate with the surrounding neighborhood. It should represent the topography of the land. I mean, this property should develop such that it flows with the land and represents the shape of the land. And if we have to terrace throughout the property to put buildings in certain locations and parking around it and really treat this space with the love that we want to see there, that gives, you know, and if it has a commercial designation, which we seem to be eliminating a lot of, but if it had, it needs to be done a lot differently, to be honest. It needs to have gathering spaces and coverings, and if you're really going to represent the CO zone and the intent, it looks a lot different than what's being presented to me. Now, if we're going to lean more towards residential, we still need to fit the neighboring developments. There's got to be a style that fits South Weber and a style that fits the neighborhood and it fits on the land and isn't built up 14 feet with another 3.5-story building on top of that. That I struggle with that.
Tim, where is the gathering place in the code? Sorry, I just wasn't following you on where that was.
The design standards talks about distinctive entrance openings, architectural finishes, visual interest, arcades. So you tell me, what's an arcade for? Promote pedestrian friendly. What is that for? Distinctive entrance openings. I mean, why have them be distinctive? Architectural features. Why have it be an architectural feature unless it's for people to view, people to enjoy? So that's
so
and it does say visual interest and it says attractive. So that's very subjective, I agree. So the only thing I can default to is South Weber, and it's typically a country feel. And I'm not seeing this country feel when I look at this building. So
I agree, it is subjective. One of the things in the code, I don't know if you can see this, is a drawing here, would something like that.
Sure, I see gathering places, I see distinctive, I see awnings, I see variety, I see architectural features, just in that little black and white that I don't see in the 3D color rendering that's been presented.
Okay, that would, I think we can work with that and make
great. That's
that
what I'm
a possibility. I don't think that's something that's
excellent.
We have been dealing a lot with the technicalities over the past over a year of getting the grades and the parking and the whatever.
Sure. Right.
And so it's the buildings I've honestly moved at least 5 different times, and so getting a lot of these fine touches to the architecture, I think is something that has not. It's been more engineering driven, this project.
Sure.
So
and that makes sense at this point. But don't tell me that well, we went with earth tone colors and we would have preferred white. That doesn't change any of the things I just read off.
All right. Well, we can make that a reality, I think. So there's no argument there.
Okay. So that's yeah, and that's my point, just as far as the design standards on that small part. And I did go into a little bit of the topography of this property, and maybe engineering can tell me why we have to have a 14-foot retaining wall and how that fits in the harmony with the neighborhood. I really am struggling with that part.
As far as the 14-foot wall goes, the whole reason that this is not developed.
You know what? I am, Leland, we have got to fix your microphone. It's.
Let me turn. Okay, with the video off, is that better?
Yeah.
No.
No?
Not really.
That's just muffled.
Okay, is that better?
No.
No? I don't know.
You know what, Leland? Maybe you could try calling in on a phone.
Yeah, use your phone on it.
If you got the invite, there's the phone number option.
Yeah,
or you could even do the Zoom on your cell phone.
Mute the Zoom and then just call in.
But I think, Tim, to answer your question on the grade, the fire marshal does regulate the grade that his trucks can enter the site and exit the site. I think it has to be no more than 5% or something like that.
Oh, no.
Because when cars pull into parking stalls, if it's over 5% grade, the cars start to slide down the hill when there's snow or whatever. And so I think that's an engineering fire issue. That I mean, I'd love to not have tall walls. It's expensive, but in order to get a fire truck in there,
Well, I think you do terraces and you have parking areas that are lower and then a building and then some more parking. You can terrace all those things and satisfy fire code. I have no doubt at all. I've been to many developments that are beautifully sat on hillsides, and you don't just completely cut the hillside, lower it on one side and raise it on the other and stick a flat building with all the parking lot around it, unless it's Walmart. I think this is something that we want to work with the topography. We want to have a building and then some parking situated and then a lower level, maybe some other parking, landscaping. It's got to fit harmony with the neighborhood around it, and just be not just this flat parking lot with a bunch of buildings on top. I really think that we can do a better job of making it flow and working with the neighborhood. I think that's our goal with the CO zone, or else we need to just, which we actually threw the CO zone out the window for a reason, but now we're still trying to use it. So if we're going to try and use it, then I want to see it used properly. Otherwise, let's just scrap it and have you work on just a residential project and let's make it right. So, but just, I still don't understand the 14-foot retaining wall.
Yeah, I mean, a fire truck can't drive down a terrace, and it can only go to a certain angle on the. And Leland can speak better than I can to this.
I completely agree. Fire trucks can't drive down something that's impossible, but I've seen developments all over hillsides, all over this country, and fire trucks drive all over them. So I'm confused with that answer.
Leland, you there?
Yes, I am.
Oh, that's much better.
That is.
Here, we can hear it.
Much better.
Okay, so addressing the issue about, gosh, I got to set up my kickstand on my phone. Just bear with me 1 second. Okay, so addressing the issue is that we've got over 40 feet of grade on this site, which is the reason that it has not developed up to this point. And so we've got about 25 feet of grade that we've been able to terrace and stack and put in as steep as we can and still meet the code. That 14-foot wall in the back is the part that we cannot absorb. Absorbing 25 feet of grade on the site as narrow as this is actually a pretty good, well, not good, very good number. But the fact that it's over 40 feet of grade on a site where we don't have more than a couple hundred feet of depth on the site to absorb that, we can't deal with it. So that's why we've got a 14-foot wall on the back. It could have been a 25-foot wall on the back.
Leland, one of the things just down the road from your proposal here, there was some patio homes went in, and they had a similar situation where there was a steep grade, and basically what they ended up doing is kind of a split level house with an entry up above and then a rear entry at a lower level in the back. Do you think something like that could be implemented in this, say for building D, if it was pushed back a little bit and reorientated so that it would have a backside that would come in at a lower level than the second floor?
Because we have a 7% grade down the street, we're able to accomplish that on the south end of the building And on the north end of the building, we're about level. And we've done that on the two long buildings. And it's just because of the slope of the street, we're not able to do all of that. And I was involved on that project down the street when I worked for Pinnacle Engineering. And you know, that's what we always try to do when it's steep is terrace between one floor and the next.
It might be something to look at on this. Open space and the gathering space. I don't see a lot of that, you know, for the residents to get together, have a barbecue outside or anything. There's no area where the residents can congregate and get to know one another. Any way to address that? Or do you want to address that?
We do have a couple of things that you aren't seeing on the site plan. There's, I don't remember the exact square footage, it's on the drawings, but we've got around 3,000 square foot of, it's called exercise, but it's specifically designed for the residents. As far as getting together, we've got that in the basement area of building A, and we've got some additional space in the basement of building B as well, specifically for the residents. Those square footages are not being counted in the required 27,000 square feet because they're not leasable out to somebody else, but they are still there. There was some discussion last week of what we can do with the little park to the north, and whether or not we can do much with that detention pond. Obviously, we don't want to flood that person out, and that's one of the things that was pointed out as far as providing a liner, and that's something that we had the engineer look at. But as far as a park or something like that, you've got that there. As far as being able to walk around the various roads or trails around that canal, obviously we don't want kids running and falling in the canal, but if a parent or somebody is walking them around the canal, there are some areas that we have done. We don't have a big, huge plaza in the middle, if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, walking along the canal, unless it's on your side of the property there, I know the canal will not allow that. The play area at the south end of that, that's pretty much dedicated to the daycare, isn't it?
The upper one certainly is. The lower one is currently planned for that, but it certainly, we can look at some options. Somebody asked earlier, you know, if you've got 150 kids, you need 6,000 square feet of play area divided by 3, so you need about 2,000 square feet. We certainly exceed that in the upper play area towards that Deer Run area, which means that the lower play area, we would have to talk to the childcare individual as far as what he or she wants right there. But we do have some areas there that are not required by code.
As far as the play areas, those have to be set aside specifically by the state rule that they cannot be shared with other uses.
Right. So that upper one that's got a door coming out of the childcare area would be specifically for the childcare. The lower area, depending on what we do with exits and everything else, that lower play area certainly could be developed without and the childcare area would still work. So we currently are showing 2 play areas, and one of them is required, and one of them has to be at least 2,000 square feet, and they typically want more than that. But
very quick question for you on open space in the commercial overlay. I'm not seeing anything on how much open space should be associated with this. And I don't think the detention basin should be considered part of the open space because it's not within that facility.
15% is what's required, and they have over that.
we have 24, and even if you deleted those other 2 play areas, we still meet the requirement.
Can you congregate that to particular areas a little bit better so it's a good area for open space?
Just a quick point of clarification. Open space is not the same as landscaping, right? So the landscaped area is required to be 15%.
Yes.
Am I wrong? In my understanding is there's not a specific percent requirement for open space per se.
Yeah, you're correct. It is landscaping that's required, not open space.
We don't have an area where people can congregate outside of the building.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that open space isn't a good thing to be talking about. It certainly is a worthy conversation. I just wanted to point out that the percent requirement is landscaping, not open space. That's all.
The easiest place to put open space, if it was wanted and the developers wanted to put it in and the neighbors wouldn't complain, would be on the roof of building B. I mean,
and that's what he's saying. Tim is saying we need to add, porticos and roofs and that sort of thing. So that's definitely on the table right now that we're going to be addressing here in the next couple of days, I guess. But I'd like to make that one of the conditions of approval is making some more visual interest, roof, that sort of thing. If we can address those things, if we can get, I think it's paragraph 1 of 5 and 11. Just make more. We can work on really making this visual appearance something stellar. So.
Okay. Hey, Taylor, I hadn't heard from you in a bit. Aesthetics, what's your thought?
Architectural stuff. I definitely have my points of view. I'm just listening so far to the other points of opinion and the like from the Planning Commission. On what I've heard so far, I'm a little concerned that as we discuss and try to maybe look at open space on the site, I think I feel like I know where it's coming from. It's going to be ultimately parking spaces that we lose. And I think parking is one of my major concerns, just making sure that we have enough. So I'm okay with the percentages and maybe not so many public spaces for gathering, as long as we get the percentage of parking correct. As far, Tim, I really appreciate your comments about the character and aesthetic of the development. And one of the things that I'm a little concerned about is the height of building. I had it up and it's escaping me now, but the most southern building is building A, correct?
Yeah, we shoved it into the ground on the south side about 4 feet to try to minimize the height of it. And we ended up at the request of staff breaking building A and B in 2 so that we could make some additional adjustments. But because of the grading, we've pushed building A down about as far as we can.
And with the assumption that you want 2 floors of residential above it, right?
Yeah, we've got 2 floors of residential. We've got a main floor commercial, which was required. And we've got a basement that we're also using for most of it for commercial.
So I guess I look at the site, and I value your professional opinion here. There's already a terraced approach, right? It runs, high on the south, runs down to the north. Visually, I'm just wondering if we could, I don't want to say flip it, but that most southern portion sits up high, and I mean, we're a little worried about the views of the residents that are to the west. And if we have a trade-off of height on building A, can we provide you through the same residential units on another building, given that we are addressing the commercial aspect of this, not requiring 27,000 square feet?
I think you would find that building A is, if you're worried about the people on the other side of the canal getting their view blocked, building A is probably the least concerning. I think you're
building D, Taylor, is the one that's off the back, that's going to be up on top of the 14-foot retaining wall, and then 3.5 stories on top of that.
Okay.
We're going to have another temple or something built.
Yeah. And I appreciate the candor, that I really do. So I guess that's one of my concerns, Rob, is just the visual impairment maybe from surrounding neighbors.
Well, and I like your thought, Taylor, because if we're able to eliminate the commercial in buildings B and C, we've got some, we lower those 2 buildings, and one of them has a basement level. Can we, lower building D also? We've got to do some terracing and get building D down, but also can we put some of those units in building B and C so that we don't have the height? I'd like to see everything more the standard.
Is the height
the
the
2.5
back
story, 35 foot, no retaining, 14-foot retaining walls. Let's get this site under control.
Is the height to the back the concern, or toward the frontage of the road?
To me, both. Definitely the back, that 14-foot plus a 3.5 story on top of it. That's concerning. But I'd like to lower the fronts too by eliminating the commercial. I'm hoping to lower everything.
So I think for me though, given the fact that the properties to the west are lower than the development, that's where I think priority should be placed over the east elevation. So
sure,
my point of view.
Yeah, if we can have a priority.
Yeah.
What do you say, Gary?
Sorry, I had to find my button there. So on the architecture, I agree with Tim. It needs more. It doesn't really blend in. It just looks like another building from Salt Lake, just plopped into South Weaver. And I'm glad the developer's willing to look at those things and maybe add a few things that gives the building a little more character. I am concerned about the height. Those residents from nearby, they bought their houses possibly with the mountain views in mind. But there's always a chance when you buy near empty land that something's going to get developed. I understand that as well. But anything we could do to lower the buildings, and that's why I like, eliminating the commercial aspect of a couple of those so we can get them down lower. I do have one question on building D. I believe it's that one. It's the one that's kind of up on stilts. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and maybe I'm asking this prematurely, but when the ground starts shaking, is that building coming down?
Well, Gary, all I can say there is we have codes, building codes, and they do take into account the danger we have in this area for earthquake potential.
Okay.
And I guess we have to trust that those codes are going to function the way they're supposed to.
Okay, and That's fine. I just wouldn't be parking my car there.
Well, it's built the same as a normal building. They just leave the bottom floor open so that you can actually pull in with a car. But the structure is the same as any kind of a dwelling.
Okay. And again, I'm a historian. I'm not an architect, so that's why I asked. Thank you.
Would it be wise right now to take like a 5-minute recess, and I can kind of consult with our guys, and you can get a drink, go to the bathroom, and talk amongst yourselves or whatever, and then we come back in 5 minutes and see if we can nail down some. I don't know if there are any other issues that need to be discussed. I don't want to cut anybody off, but is that something that would be wise right now?
No, because I want to give my comment about the.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, don't shut him off.
Yeah, I have two issues. One is the retaining wall in the back. I'm with Tim. That's just a monster. We got to figure out how to make that topography work to the benefit of the beautification of the project. So I just a big wall that you could put a movie on is just crazy to me. So I'd like to see us do that. The other thing, Joe, is I'm concerned about the look of the buildings. The buildings to me, they're so plain Jane. I'd like to see different materials, particularly in the back, used, hardy board or something that creates a design and visual in and out. Does that make sense? In and out, where it's not just one flat wall. And I know it's not that way, but a little more appeal. It's probably because it's just all stucco in the back. I'm guessing, looking to me, I couldn't tell by what I was looking at in the pictures, but we have some property here in South Weaver now that they look great from the front, and in the back they're just flat with siding, and it doesn't look right.
Talking about the townhomes over by 84.
That may or may not be the ones I'm talking about.
No, that's something that we could definitely address. I think that's definitely something that we need. And I think honestly, the buildings and the slopes and that sort of thing have been moving so rapidly to meet fire code and all that stuff that's anyway. I think technically we meet code. I think maybe aesthetically we can put a better shot on it. So I'm not, doesn't hurt my feelings to go back and make some rooftop structures and some differentiation and on the fronts of these buildings and that sort of thing.
Right. So those are my.
We had 2 buildings in the back, and the second fire official basically got rid of that. The first one was fine with our 2 buildings in the back. The second one wasn't. As far as the materials, we've listed several materials. And so we have listed hardy, we have listed stucco, we have listed stone. And certainly with what is being proposed, there would be a combination of that. And the relatively quick 3-dimensional renderings that you got and the artistry hand rendered ones that I sent before were primarily just to give you shape and colors. But yeah, the materials, for example, Harristone, for example, that's made in Ogden, they have a whole bunch of different colors and shapes and sizes of that particular material. And as you mentioned, hardy, but I have seen a number of newer buildings that don't look like they were built in the 80s that are earth tone. So they're not done. The biggest thing that we were trying to get to is get to a point where you'd approve the site. And it sounds like there's some things that we would need to change and some things that you'd like us to change. And it sounds like Joseph is willing to still talk. So
And I appreciate that. And as I mentioned, though, just remember that stucco, brick, hardy, stone, that's all lipstick. So I'm looking a little deeper sometimes because we can change the color, but it doesn't change the architecture. So
no, we're not talking about that. I think there needs to be, some serious thought put into these to make it look like you're like more like this. But this has flat roofs. I don't think we're talking about having to make these gables, right?
I don't know. I mean, I love gables. I love different types of architecture. So
right. No, I mean, I think if we change, this, like, for instance, this unit here looks like an old town, storefront, and this one looks like a different old town storefront, even though it's one continuous building.
Which seems appropriate on the commercial spaces, but on your residential spaces, that wouldn't be appropriate. You might want to be a little bit more of a residential look, whatever it takes. Just have that in mind. I don't want to be the architect for you.
No, I'm just trying to get direction. So.
Okay.
But the traditional mixed use where you've got a shop above the, you've got apartments or whatever above the commercial does typically look like that diagram that you guys had for.
That diagram does. I mean, a brownstone doesn't look that way, and that's got a lot of times they put commercial on the main floor and you've got residential above it. I mean, there's a lot of different variety that you can use. Just because we put in a black and white doesn't mean that's what we necessarily need to have. We just have a pretty good idea that what's been presented doesn't work for me personally, but just trying to help.
That's good. Anyone else have any comments?
Well, so
the main thing, like Joseph said, is not to get this to look like the what I call the barracks over on I-84 and 475.
Wes,
something
honestly,
that would fit into the environment.
Wes, can I just ask us not to use that word?
Agreed.
Okay. I would like us not to use that degrading word against the people, because we have good people that live there and love those units. And I love those people. So I don't think we should use anything negative as far as talking about.
I'll agree with that, but I think we ought to have in this area here, closer to the mountain, something that more fits into a mountain environment and a valley environment versus a plain white type of stucco on the outside. The other thing is the height of these. There's a lot of people who've really expressed concern about the heights of this, and if you can address that some way or another, that too. And my thing is open spaces. If you can get a little bit more open space in there somehow, that'd be great for people that live there to congregate.
So, Fred, can you refresh my memory as to what the code allows as far as height goes?
One of the things that's generating the height, particularly for buildings A and B, is the 12-foot for the commercial, and trying to get a 9-foot ceiling in these places for residential. And we really don't have any extra height based on that. So we again tried to push buildings A and B down as far as we could, and based on the various heights, I'm not sure what else to do. In building C, we were able to take at least a couple of feet out of that because we had a little bit more flexibility depending on what you do with the 36-foot drive aisle. But we currently have a little bit of flexibility with building C. And building D, because those two levels are residential, we don't have to have the 12-foot ceilings in there. And like I said, I originally had that into 2 buildings, but we gave into the fire official, despite the fact that I believe the legislature would totally disagree with his interpretation on adopting Appendix D.
So Fred,
And that's,
Fred, you're saying on the first level of the commercial, it has to be by the zone has to be 12 feet. And then the residential, we're trying to get 9-foot ceilings.
right. And so that's currently
There's
limiting
a three-story limit, right? 3-story limit, and then
right
50 feet max.
Right. We got three stories, 50-foot max, and we have done everything we can to stay way away from the 50 feet. We originally had the buildings taller, but again, trying to terrace as much as we could, we pushed buildings A and B down as far as we could and still get them to work with the existing height on 2700 East. Building D, I'm not sure how to push it any further down with a single building. That's why I had it as 2 buildings originally. But if we turn the buildings sideways, that was mentioned earlier, because of the 40-foot fall, it doesn't actually help us. That's one of the reasons we've got the buildings going north and south, is to try to take advantage of the fact that the grade's going down that direction. If we turn the buildings, you would have lots of floors or lots of stairs within the building. And it didn't help us, but we've purposely broken up the buildings A, B, C, D, whatever, in fairly small areas, and there is no reason that we can't change materials once you go from one inside corner to another, and that would certainly make these look like it's a series of buildings built instead of one big building. And we're trying to solve. We thought we had a site plan a year ago, last June, and in the course of the last year, we found out that staff had a number of changes that we needed to make, and so we've made those. But obviously, you weren't consulted until now, and we appreciate your feedback.
Appreciate that. And welcome to development, right? So,
Fred, a quick question for you, Fred. If
I gotta get this out because I wasn't done with my comments yet.
all right.
So one of the things that I want to make sure, because I think Tim brought something up, it's got to look like and feel like South Weaver, like the rest of the neighborhoods, and the look I think you might do well to go look at is the development that Leland said he worked on, the patio homes. Those are a great look. They have cool railings for their front porches, cool gables and archways, and man, that's where I would go look, because then you start to get a feel of what that neighborhood looks like.
What's the address there?
It's on 2700. It's the next road past Deer Run Drive. It's
Going south or going north?
Going south.
South.
And how long ago were those built?
2-3 years ago.
Okay.
Good looking architecture, in my opinion. And if we're looking, you could do some different things, and it satisfies the need to look like the rest of the neighborhood.
A quick question for you, Fred. If you do away with the commercial on building B and C, would that drop it down to a lower height?
That's a great question. Right now, we've got our upper levels are currently cantilevering, and so if we take out the lower level, that creates some additional challenges. That's something that we would have to look at how to solve. I'm not saying we can't. I'm just saying that you don't just take the fact that the upper 2 floors of buildings A, B, and C are actually bigger than the lower floors of buildings A, B, and C. If you just drop them down, the cars get smashed. So,
Fred, we may be able to make up that parking in the back if we were to take those same buildings, keep the same height, eliminate the commercial, but throw the buildings, some of the units in the back on top of the buildings in front. We could reduce the footprint of building D and maybe make up parking. I'm just throwing out spitball.
We certainly can look at it, and concept of lowering if we can get the buildings to be lower, but if you look at our elevation on 2700 East, I'm not sure how much we can push building B down. Building C is still up a little bit, and it certainly could be lowered depending on what we do.
Well, I'm saying is, I think I would propose maybe keep the buildings along the road the same height, because that would allow us, if we got rid of the commercial, that would allow us to take the building in the back that's on stilts and maybe shrink its footprint or do something with that and put those units maybe on the front. I don't know if that's something we got to go through with Leland and Fred. I'm just brainstorming here.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, you're hearing from us, so now you need time to ingest.
Sure, but I don't know that we can push buildings A and B down any further as far as their grade, but building D, as far as having a building on stilts, I was hoping to have the parking lot slope more, but we were given a bunch of requirements, and that's as steep as we can currently make it. But if we were to move the units that are currently on building D and put them into building B and C, or at least look at how much of that we could, that's, it is possible that we might be able to still keep the same number of doors, units, and if the commercial was reduced, and lower the overall height of the buildings and possibly the site. That I'm not sure of. I'd have to talk to Leland. But yeah, my original intent wasn't to have one larger building D, but to have two smaller buildings in the back. And we went around a number of times with the current fire reviewer, and this was the only way that we could solve his requirements. So
let's I've got 8:45. Let's get back here at 8:50. We'll just leave the YouTube running. Take your break. I know I need one. And we'll come back here at 8:50, if that's okay with everybody. And so just keep it running, and Kim, just keep it running, and we'll be back.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yep. All right. Need some water.
Did you hear the toilet? Yeah. Come here. Check this out. Giving out too much. I'll tell you what, let me text Joey and see. I've been leaving him to speak with the architect and engineer for right now, but I'll text him.
I've got 850. Are we ready to keep going?
Sounds good.
Okay, there's not something where I can just get you.
Yeah, no. Okay.
Okay. Um, hey, no, never mind.
Say it, Rob.
What's that?
Say it. What were you going to say?
Well, I was just wondering if Brandon knows about the water pressure up there. Someone had said that the water pressure isn't very good in that area, and I didn't know if that was, if there's a problem with our water tank there, resolving that eventually, or where are we at with that? Do you know, Brandon?
I can give you a partial report. The residents that live below the canal are on a different pressure zone than above the canal. So this would actually be on a separate pressure zone than at least where I'm aware. There's been some concerns raised. That being said, we are in process of doing designing a project to get the transmission line from the east reservoir more directly connected. Without going into a ton of detail, that may help some. But I actually have not been aware that there was a concern that there was low pressure over there. So I am also looking into that further to see if there is some reason why that would be the case.
We had a flow test, did we not, from the city?
Yes, you did. You have I mean, we ran a fire flow test and you have the fire flow. So I don't think that was the concern. I think the concern was just what kind of impact would the lofts have on the water pressure in the area where there's people concerned that there's already low pressure. So I'm looking into it further.
Okay. The other question, and maybe you know, Brandon, is does this project have impact on Weber Basin's project to push their pipe up the hill? Are they using some of that ground, or how is that? Are they staying in the road? Do you know the details of that?
I know what they've talked about thus far with us, but it's not, at least what they've presented so far is not set in stone.
Okay.
As far as what Weber Basin has presented. So they've talked about being in the frontage road on the east side of the frontage road. That would require potentially relocating some of the storm drain and the water if that were to be where it actually ended up. But I don't want it to come across like that is for sure the plan, because as at least as far as they've presented so far, it's not set in stone.
Okay. It's less to do with these guys other than just the area, and I get that. I just it could be a construction nightmare on 2700 East if they're doing their thing and the lofts are doing their thing, and so.
Well, we're going to be on our site.
Yeah, and it's just I hoping that nobody has conflict. That's all, and just wanted to know where they were all at. So I appreciate that. Thank you for indulging me. Joe, it's Sunshine Court is the road. Sunshine Court.
Just let me weigh in on that. Those are single residences, which, if we were to do single residences here, we could do something like that, but where it's multifamily, it's a lot more difficult. Joe actually has talked with me over this break about what we could do about that, and he has a proposal.
So I don't know if you can make any sense of this drawing that I just did, but this is roughly the shape of the property. It's not to scale by any means. I did this in about 1 minute, but you got the canal here going out. Okay. You got 2700 going across here. And I recognize you have a concern with the retaining walls. And so what Leland's the engineer. And so what I was brainstorming with him is potentially lining the buildings up along the back of the property and using the foundation walls to retain the property. So you would walk in maybe on the second floor and go to your different units to live, but these units would spill out onto a large green space that would kind of contour the road, the canal. So you'd have kind of a walking green district that would bring you up to the road. But you wouldn't have a stark wall. You'd have a building that was using its own foundation to retain the site. And so from the backside, it would look like a condominium project from this direction. So you would, instead of seeing a wall and a fence on top of the wall and cars parked there, you'd see maybe buildings with the facing out. And their their front doors would maybe spill out onto this sidewalk / green area that would circulate through the project, and maybe the commercial building would maybe stay the same, but that would eliminate the you wouldn't change the slope because we have to have a 5% slope on the site. That's a bottom line for fire. But you would hide that retaining wall and that retainage by means of the actual structures. I don't know if that makes sense.
Sounds good.
I like
Be
it.
interesting to see. Be interesting to see.
I like it too. It's intriguing.
It is. I want to make sure we still have good setbacks from the canal.
Oh
So-
yeah, I think already from our current retaining walls, we already, what is it, 18 feet, Leland, from our retaining walls to the actual canal property, and the canal property is 100 feet wide, but the canal is only, you know, I don't know, what is it?
No, that's only true on the, where we're abutting commercial property or residential property.
Okay.
Yeah, on the west side, we have, 15 to 5 feet. And then on the north side, we have some 0 lot line for the wall. So that would change.
Because I still want to make sure you're not eliminating the possibility of lowering the height of these buildings, by reducing some commercial. That we still want you to try and lower the height, because I don't want to trade off of a 14-foot, retaining wall and then a 3.5-story building to be, well, we just move the building closer and we still have that same height.
Well, I think instead of having your 14-foot wall and then having a 3-story building on top, you would incorporate your building down into the base of that, where that 14-foot wall. So you'd have a story here, and then you'd only have a 2-story above that. You see what I'm saying? So you're no longer 14 plus 50 potentially by code.
Okay.
But you're 3 stories starting down at the base of the wall and going up from.
No, I just want to make sure though, because sometimes even a shorter building brought closer to the property line can appear taller.
Right.
So I want to be careful that we're just bringing the tall building closer, and actually visually it's taller than what we would have had with setbacks. So I just want to make sure that we're still looking at setbacks and where the current building is located. I don't know that I want it to be a lot closer to the canal.
Well, it would be a walkout. And the good thing about this site is we only have 2 residential neighbors. There's one that has about an 80-foot section, and another one that has about 15 feet. And those are the only 2 residences that abut our property. The other 2 sides are the canal, which is about 100 feet wide, and then across the canal.
And there's residences on the other side of that canal that would look up.
They're not adjacent to our property.
Yeah, and that's more or as much my worry is them as
but with this idea, you would actually have the front of the building, which is the most attractive side. Both sides would be equally attractive, but this one would be the front, the presentation side, and then you have a walkout entrance, maybe barbecue pits or whatever. It would be a big yard, I think, because we have quite a, anyway.
Okay, no, I like the thought.
So are you saying that you'd have a 2-story complexes in there for each resident?
No,
upper level, then
the main level could walk out to this green space, and everyone else could have an exit to go out to the green space and circulate through the pattern, through the development potentially.
I'd like to see something on that.
So to answer your question, Wes, it would be 3 stories on the downhill side facing the canal, and 2 stories on the uphill side facing the parking. And that's that terracing you were talking about.
Right. Well, would the middle floor, would that be also an access to the lower floor, or would they have to come all the way around?
No, you'd have an elevator inside. You could get up and down to the maybe rooftop, element, or down to the green space.
I appreciate the work. I do. I think
I do too.
That's like something that more of what we're trying to do in my mind.
So Rob, I do have a question on that, and I've been trying to review everything that I've got in front of me, but I can't seem to find it. Was there coordination or notice sent to Weaver Davis Canal Company about this development proposal?
Yeah.
And if so,
Yeah, there is.
We've already got crossing agreements and everything with them.
okay. That was the crossing agreement obviously is a big one, but I guess I'm more curious to know, you know, there'll be a fence between the development and the canal.
I think that was mentioned in the development agreement.
I'm fairly certain that the canal would insist on a fence here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
And
no,
I
I
just
think it's code anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, there
Just
has to
wanted-
be a fence along the canal. Then I will just point out that they've reached out and wanted to kind of talk a little bit more about like the retaining wall and things like that. And so there's still a few things that they've reached out and wanted to discuss. But as far as like the crossing for the canal, they already have a license agreement that's recorded for that. So yes, they're very much aware of it.
So where do we go from here if this is maybe a look we'd like to see as a planning commission? From just, you know, the scratch paper, I like it. Of course, there's a lot of details involved, but I'm intrigued enough to say, hey, this may be something that we all can live with.
And I'd just like to mention that this is all subject to layout. I'm going to figure out if I can make that work with grades and parking and building depths and all of that. That's going to be quite a bit of work over the next little bit.
We're trying to accommodate you, and Leland is the guy that has to make it all work with code and all the different reviews by the fire. And so I hope you're seeing that we're willing to you know, make this thing as nice as possible, but we really need to do this. Leland, when do you think you could get us a sketch and can we define the other issues tonight and say, okay, you know, subject to better architectural character, you know, reorienting the site. You know, we need to have some defined benchmarks because we do have a right to develop this thing according to the code. And so, but I think if we can agree tonight to certain.
Well, and no one's questioning you guys' right to develop it. Please don't misunderstand. And to code, I get that too. I mean, yeah. we can do better than code sometimes, right?
Oh, I agree. But let's see if we can come up with some benchmarks tonight on these. I think if we reduce the commercial aspect of this, then the parking, I think, for the weekends, it was another issue that was discussed, is not really, I think it goes away. And if we can reorient the site plan so that our elevations of these buildings is actually dropped quite a bit, you know, and create that kind of walkability feel in a site plan. That also deals with the retaining issue in the back where you just don't have this large, you know, 8 to 14 foot wall. And we can play with the roof lines and the differentiation between each unit. Can we define those issues right now to where we have some benchmarks that we can meet, and maybe we meet in 2 weeks, and here we are. I don't know, Leland, I don't know what your project schedule is like. Is there any way we could have in maybe 2 weeks, kind of a rough sketch of what might work?
We can do that.
So here's the points I've got written down then, Joe, is I think with that kind of a sketch plan allows us to have flow. I think we talked about that, and certainly makes the approaches easy to do with the 36 feet. I think there's, with the elimination of some commercial, the parking problems that we're perceiving are probably going to go away or better than they were. Did you include that your other commercial space besides the daycare, you planned on that, right?
So I would like to write up this bullet point or this whatever we're going to do. If we're going to have 4 or 5 bullet points, I'd like to write it up to where if we have not finalized a written agreement, we've designed this building, as you know, it's been a sticking point from the very beginning, but we've designed this building specifically for this particular buyer. I mean, and so if he does not fall through, then maybe we eliminate it completely. But if we can get this buyer to purchase this 14,000 square feet, then I would like to produce that for him. But we've been to his house. Fred's done 4 or 5 of his facilities. He's worked with us hand in glove to design this space. So we'd like to include it if we can. We haven't been able to finalize a deal because we haven't been able to give him a sure, but he's been wanting to build here for several years. So, but I get what I'm saying is, I'd like to have the option to include that space, but if not, we can eliminate it.
Where was that space going to be in building
A?
Oh, okay. All right. The other thing that is sticking for me, I don't know about the rest of the commission, but if we're eliminating commercial for you, and this is just becoming a residential project, I'd like to see the number of doorknobs go down. I think just go a long ways with the community as well. I mean, because they're feeling like 70 is an awful lot, 72 onto that road. Now I know we've had studies and traffic stuff, but if and I'm not saying we have to agree to a number tonight, but I think it would go a long way in goodwill if we figured out a lower doorknob number.
And that's fair. I think we'd be willing during the break. I spoke to one of our investors. And I think he's willing to do a few residential.
Okay. Commissioner, am I missing anything else?
No, I like what we're talking about. I have just a couple little items that are just more crossing T's, dotting I's.
Okay.
I'll just mention them real quick. I'd like to see, the CC&Rs, covenants, conditions, and restrictions, just to review those. And I feel like what we've done in the past in other developments in the city is we don't allow rentals in the units unless they're family related. So.
Hey, Henry, what's the status? Who's the law firm that we've got drafting those? Anyway, they're in the process of being drafted. So.
And so I would just suggest that. I'd like to see a current title report that actually shows your current legal description. It's surveyed. Right now, the only title report we have is the actual policy when you guys acquired the parcels in their original form. We should actually have a title report that shows the survey description.
So I appreciate the concern. The survey has been recorded. It was recorded last Friday.
I'm not worried about the survey. Surveys get filed in a different office. That's no problem. A title report shows the description and then any items that affect that description. So we just legally should have a current title report matching the description of this development on record. So yeah, just have your title company update their title.
I appreciate that, Tim, but I'm not sure that's part of the planning commission review process. But
it is title reports required as part of any development.
I haven't seen that in code, but anyway.
Yeah, it's part of the checklist. So
I don't see that in code. But
and just go to your, it looks like you've had a title policy done, so they just need to update.
I'm sending it to you. Honestly, I can get it updated and sent to you, but I'm just saying it's not part of the requirements for the code. So.
Yeah, Barry, is that not accurate that we require title reports on all, or Brandon, on all developments?
That is correct. We do require them on all developments.
Okay, I was confused why this one would be any different. And then lastly, I'm not sure if I have a good picture of the detention basin and what it looks like. I just want to know, just paint me a picture. Engineering wise, I understand that it has to operate a certain way, but visually, I want to picture what I'm looking at and what you're presenting.
Leland, did we get that? Leland sent in a new drawing today. I'm not sure if you
I
received it.
sent it out earlier today.
Because the neighbor had was the liner, and so he updated his drawing.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about the engineering, but yeah, definitely I want
What is it?
It's got the liner, but I want to know what it physically looks like as we drive by. Is it all mowed? Is there rock that grows weeds? Is it fenced? Do we
have a landscaping plan for that.
The landscaping plan, Tim, calls for the bottom of it to be rock and kind of the west side to be rock. And then kind of wrapping around that is native grasses. It's a mixture of, it's a native grass mix like you would see, you know, along a freeway or something like that.
Okay. So most likely we have some kind of a decorative fencing to keep people out of it, or
We got a fence.
say that again.
I don't recall if there's a fence on that or not, but let's see.
I just don't want it to drive by and look at a weed patch. I think it needs to be maybe taken care of a little bit better than what I'm hearing.
As far as a detention basin, it could look like Liberty Park there, which is just a grassy area. That would work.
I would like that personally, but it seems like on the frontage road.
That's not what's been proposed. It's not a manicured grass. It's more of a native seed mix.
That worries me a little bit. Just
all right. Leland, is grass going to grow on this thing? Can we make that? Can we make grass grow?
The sides all flip at 3-to-1, which is mowable. So yes.
All right, grass it is.
Yeah, look at the Liberty Park and also the one at the end of Port Road currently. They've got two real nice detention basins, which are basically just big shallow area with grass around them all the way through it.
So then is it grass in the bottom instead of rock?
Yes.
I'm asking Leland.
I'm not the landscape architect. I didn't draw that plan. I'm sorry.
But we could make it grass and have it and put topsoil, I guess, right?
Yeah, whatever it takes, just so it's clean. I just, you know, it's going to be the entrance to your development. So I think it should just look clean.
Let's do grass. Henry, write it down.
Did you guys decide a fence all the way around it or no? Sorry.
I wouldn't.
No?
Not if it's grass, I wouldn't.
Yeah, if it's going to be grass, it's going to be a play area anyway, so.
But yeah, I do want to make sure it works for Taylor, because I know sometimes we're worried about water conservation and I don't know what.
Well, let's make sure we at least have a fence on the resident side.
Sounds good.
So, Tim,
Yes.
I get what you're saying, and as long as Joseph is okay with green grass, I kind of like the idea of native grasses. It kind of preserves the feel as it is now, which I think is kind of nice, especially for the neighbor adjacent to the property. I know in his public comment, he talked about a little bit of a concern about people gathering near his home. Either way,
And I'm okay with native grasses as long as it's just native grasses. It doesn't turn into a weed patch coming through the rocks that can't be maintained.
It's easier to maintain it with a lawnmower than go and pick weeds. So
it sure is.
So I want it to be kind to the neighborhood. So.
Okay.
So there would need to be a fence along the canal side too.
Right.
So we're talking south side and west side.
I'm assuming there's fence all along the canal to prevent anybody from entering the canal.
that's not a problem. So
That's about it on my checklist.
Okay. My checklist is good. Wes, your checklist?
Can we enumerate these real quick?
Yes, we will.
So are you guys grassing it, or what was the consensus? Because you've got to come to a conclusion so that he.
Yeah, we will. I think we'll come up with a number of items, a list that we'll repeat just for you, Michelle.
But quick, Michelle, we said grass and we said fence on south and west side.
Yeah.
Okay, Wes, speak now or forever hold your peace. I guess he's holding his peace. Is Wes on mute?
No, he's there.
No, I'm here.
Oh, yeah, okay, he's good. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Tim, you're next on my screen, so.
I think I said enough.
Taylor?
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering if I can get some clarification. I think this is more from staff on the conditional use permits. In the letter that was sent to us, or the date on this memo was September 1st, 2020. I'm not sure if I'm following this, and it's just only because I didn't see it initially in the staff memos on the original packet. So can you help me understand here that there's a conditional use
Yes.
that will be allowed?
Yeah,
even prior to
this project is a conditional use in its entirety, the whole, because it has residential component. So that makes it in that CO zone, that's a conditional use. Residential use is conditional. There will be an additional conditional use permit required to have a daycare center in there.
Mm-hmm.
We're not being asked or not asking you to review that conditional use permit yet, because we don't even have an application for it yet. But because we know there's a strong possibility that there will be a daycare in there, we have looked at this project with that in mind and what impacts it may have on the project. But you will be seeing an additional one if their sale goes through. You'll see an additional conditional use application come through for that.
Okay, so I guess I'm just looking at this portion of the memo that was sent to us as part of this meeting, and it's the part that's in quotations, and it says, because of the possible adverse impacts of large-scale commercial developments. And is that just based upon the commercial component of this is on a
Yes.
larger than an acre?
Yes, that's exactly what it means.
It doesn't matter that the commercial component is maybe not the predominant component.
No.
Okay.
In the CO zone, any commercial use over an acre is also a conditional use. So you kind of have two conditional use components there. One is it's over an acre, and two, it has the residential use.
But we're not asking you to really look deeply or address specifically the conditional use right now. That would come with final. We're just suggesting that because we know of some of those potential uses, if there are site elements that should potentially be addressed, that would relate to a conditional use, you should probably consider some of those things. But based on the conversation that we've had tonight and potential site changes that would change things entirely, probably not ready to address any of those very specifically.
No, I appreciate that. Appreciate that. And the clarification provided. I just was reading that and I was a little confused by it. So, thank you.
Sorry, we weren't more clear in the way we wrote that.
No, I get it now. I just was throwing me for a loop initially.
Okay. Gary, anything, bud?
I like the direction we're going. Just, if we can make them look better, if we can reduce the height in any way possible. And yeah, I'm interested to see what you bring forward.
Okay. Appreciate that. So if we put together a bullet list tonight, do we table next? I don't know how to go about this next.
Let's just continue it for 2 weeks and see what we can come up with and bring and send it back to you so you can say,
yay or nay,
swap this out, swap that out, or whatever. And
So,
by then we'll know if Leland can actually make the engineering work. That's what drives this whole thing. So
I have an issue with the 2 weeks. We've already had 2 meetings in 2 weeks. We have our regularly scheduled planning commission next week. We're not paid like city council. If I were to charge you for the hours that I put in doing this, you wouldn't be able to afford me. I think we need to wait. And I mean, I know you're rushing to get this done, but give us your A game. And I don't think you can really, you might be able to get the details in 2 weeks, but let's get something better than what we got last week.
So Gary, what would you recommend?
Let me just, go ahead.
I'm curious from Commissioner Boatwright on a timetable that seems reasonable.
Well, our next meeting's October 8th.
So make it part of that meeting?
Yeah.
And the general plan?
Sure. I think that we got the general plan all buttoned up. I hope we don't have another hour-long conversation with that.
Just for you guys to know, we've got some conditional short-term rental conditional use reviews coming up on the October meeting. So I just want to make you aware that those are going to happen on that meeting as well.
Here's my feeling, and I appreciate your concern, Gary. I do. These folks did pay $500 to have a special meeting with the Planning Commission. I know we don't see any of that, but
They've had 2.
What's that?
They've had 2.
Yeah, that's true. They've had 2. But that said, I think as a goodwill gesture, I think we should be able to accommodate them in some kind of meeting in a couple of weeks. It's not a planning commission meeting it's not more than one planning commission meeting a week. I don't know. I think I'm okay to be accommodating to these folks, just as a show of goodwill.
thank you.
Well, and if they can come to us with a clean package so we don't have another 4-hour meeting, or
I don't want another 4-hour meeting.
Spend another 24 hours reviewing 500 pages. That's my concern.
So if you guys had it completely tied up, bundled up in a cute bow and tie, and we scheduled something for like the 16th of September, that we've had at least a few days to really review before that, would that work?
Fred and Leland, you'd have to say whether we can have it to them maybe by Monday, 14th or something.
I can. Here's the thing. The product that you're seeing now has probably 2 months of work wrapped into it. And what we'll be able to give you in 2 weeks is, yes, we can make this work. This is kind of what it looks like. Do you like this better or not, so that we can go ahead and flesh it out? That's what we'll be looking at in 2 weeks.
I just wanted to point that out as well. What probably is the most efficient would be for them to bring you more of the concept, and for Leland to at least know that it works. Right. And Fred, in consultation together, and the staff isn't going to have time to review that from that perspective. So I think what you should expect would be more of well, do we like kind of what they're, the direction they're going, what they've put together? And then they're still going to have to, if you're giving head nods to that, it looks like it's got legs to it, then they're going to have to go back and finish up what they would need to. Staff would have to look through the rest of it to make sure that it's meeting everything. Certainly, we don't have to rehash several things that have already been reviewed. So it wouldn't have to be everything, I suppose. But I just want to, I think we can try to be as accommodating as possible. But I don't want there to be expectations that are difficult to meet.
So I appreciate that explanation, Brandon, and I support that. So if it is,
That's where you get the big bucks, Brandon.
Right.
if it really is just coming to us and saying, hey, here, we fleshed this out more from the last discussion, what do you think? I'm good with that. But if they're expecting an approval,
Well,
that's a different thing.
If we give you a concept in a couple of weeks and you look at it and go, I like what you had first better, except for this and this and this, we know. If you look at it and go, wow, this is a whole lot better, we like this a lot better, we know whether or not to spend more time on it. And hopefully we get that kind of a response back a lot. It'll be easier than trying to do what we've asked you to do so far.
Okay.
So am I for 2 weeks from today, or need longer or less for that? I've lost track, sorry.
I can do the 16th or 17th. 2 weeks would be the 16th. I can be available.
Okay.
I can be available. Fred, I will try and have my part done in a week and give you a week to work on footprints that work in the paths that we can create.
Well, and you've got a couple of footprints to take advantage of, so hopefully they'll help.
Yeah, it's all modular, so I think we can make that work.
I appreciate y'all accommodating the time frame and working with this. So
what time would that meeting be? Would that be at 6 o'clock again, or is it?
Yeah, we should make it at 6 so I don't get confused so much. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, just consistency for me works.
Okay.
So just real quick, if it's on the 16th, I am actually flying back from Phoenix. So my flight is 6 to 7:30. So if you have any traffic or parking questions, if you could get those to me earlier, otherwise I can jump on it, as soon as I get off the plane. But
I think we know the volumes are. Thank you so much, Joe.
So
I think, can we define that we're trying to create a better walkable, greeny architectural feel, and
okay,
potentially reducing the commercial and
so hang on, Joe, on that. Jamie, I need some direction on how to make that happen. To reduce the commercial, do we have to have a special public hearing and meeting on that?
You cut out briefly at the beginning of it.
Sorry, I'm wondering on how to make the eliminating the commercial from those. What do I got to do special?
And are you talking about the one that fronts the main street or the other buildings?
No, the other buildings, if that's what we're going to try to do, is make those other. Do we have to do anything special?
No, there are 3 factors to consider here. One is the requirement that anything that fronts the street have commercial. And I believe the only interpretation of that section that works is that the ground floor is 100% commercial. For the other structures, they are not required to have commercial on the ground floor. So then the third and final consideration is the requirement of minimum square footage of commercial for the overall development that's captured in the development agreement. We'd have to have somebody run that computation and see if you meet it with only commercial in the one building. If you don't, then it would require revision of the development agreement. If you do, then we would be okay.
Okay.
I don't think it would. I mean, we can look at it, but I don't think it would meet it. Fred, with those 2 floors.
No, weren't you about 11,000 square feet?
I don't think it would. I don't think off the cuff that it would meet the 27,000. So
We've got, building A has got, what did I have? 9,000, then another 9,000. So, but yeah, we're not going to get 27,000 between those.
what's the process for creating an addendum, getting an addendum on that?
So yeah, that's what I want to know. What's that process look like?
It would require council approval. I think that kind of an amendment to so there's a little bit of an anomaly with this development agreement where it labels itself as a legislative action. I'm not sure that it was adopted in accordance with the requirements of a legislative action. We went back and pieced together some things, and I think it was adopted to meet the standard for an administrative action. And my recommendation typically on a development agreement is that it would be an administrative action. So I think the process would be the usual one you would follow, that it would be recommended by the Planning Commission and then adopted by the City Council. And it, of course, as a development agreement, would require consent by all parties involved. So it would be both the developer and the city that would sign it.
So do I got to have that done first before we can approve a preliminary plan?
It could go forward concurrently.
Okay.
I think it'd be part of our recommendation to do that amendment.
That's correct. And your recommendation would be conditioned on the council approving the development agreement when
all of it
considers the whole package.
Right.
Okay.
It's kind of like a rezone. We do sometimes simultaneous with a subdivision, and we just recommend both. If A, then B.
Correct.
Okay, so that makes that understandable. Joe, is that where you're at? You okay with that?
Yeah, I think that's, if we, and this is all based on whether we can get Leland, the guy, you know, who's got all the brains to actually make this work. So, but I hopefully we can make it work. And if not, I think we'll just see if we can push on with our original drawing. But I think we're amenable to negotiations and coming to agreeable terms with everybody and doing the things that need to be done to make this thing look great. And so let's see what we can get in the next 10 days and
okay.
See what we can come up with.
So just the things that you know, I think we're starting to answer some of these problems, and some of these things start to go away now. The access and the parking. So I think that's where we wait next. Is that what I'm hearing, everybody? We schedule for the 16th. I think Kim's already sent out an invitation, if I'm not mistaken.
Not yet, but I will.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate you jumping on this so fast. And Barry said that he's never seen it jump on within a week, and I really appreciate your time. I really do, because we got, you know, several families that are invested in this, and you know, it's really gonna be a good project, but you know, there's a lot of things right on it. So
well, I appreciate that, and we as citizens are invested in it too. So
right.
And so that's why, you know, we want to help you understand what we would like to see here, and hopefully it's agreeable for all of us.
Do you want me to give a list of things, Michelle, that
I would love that.
that we're kind of looking for? I mean, and then I'll just give my list, and then if I'm missing some things, if those can add to it.
Okay.
But just based on tonight's discussion, that just recommending that we revisit this preliminary approval request with a request to look at a new plan that deals with residential only on buildings B, C, and D. Look at a 36-foot wide entrance only on the near the commercial entrance, or near the building that's has commercial. That we amend a development agreement just to show the square footage minimum that would handle the daycare. That we look for redesign engineering, which would in some effect disperse that 14-foot retaining wall throughout the site, whether by terracing throughout or using the buildings themselves. And again, by eliminating the commercial in the buildings B, C, and D, that we look to lower the height of the buildings. Also, that we look to reduce the number of residential units, and that we have architecturally designed buildings all the way around. That the buildings have harmony with the surrounding neighborhoods. That the detention basin be some form of a mowable grass with fencing on the south and the west, and have the linings in the bottom and sides as required to protect the Egyptian owner. That we show fencing along all the canal. That we update the title report with a current survey description.
Owners, what I would suggest on the rental, if that's going to be an issue, is that we follow FHA guidelines.
That's 20%, I think.
No, I think it's 50, but you can't get FHA.
If you have your attorney who's drafting the CCNRs look to the Utah Condominium Ownership Act,
there we go. Yeah.
There's a provision in there that speaks to the limitation of rentals, and it defines what it means by family and relative. And I think if he sticks to that confine, you can just pull the definition straight from code.
I would like to see that. That's just my opinion.
You can't go more restrictive than that. So the language is right there for him to grab.
Okay. So do you have that citation again? What was that?
No, not off the top of my head, but if you go to the Utah Condominium Ownership Act, and then if he just does a text search for rental limitations, there's a section directly on point. Have him ring me if he can't find it.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks, Jim.
Other concerns that the resident had next to the detention basin was the light. There is not a light there, so I'm okay with no light there either.
Okay. Yeah.
So Tim, I just wanted to clarify on that, on the detention basin as well. So if we're requiring grass, I know in one of their landscaping plans, you guys had identified an irrigation system, but an irrigation system is not within the detention basin agriculture, or not agricultural. I just skipped on it. I apologize. The
service district.
No, sorry. The landscaping plan.
Landscaping.
Yep.
Yeah, they show an irrigation system in there.
Am I just missing it then? I'm way zoomed in on this.
There's two views. One on the top view, it's I think it's L4.
Yep.
The top view is the actual landscaping, and then the bottom view is the sprinkler plan.
Okay. Yeah, that's where I got hung up. Is there no legend to this? Is that why I'm not understanding it? Maybe.
Sorry, it's L3.
Okay. No, I was struggling with that for there. So, okay. And then one other item, when you were providing your list there, Tim, and I don't know how the rest of the planning commission feels about this, but I'm not sure if I'm ready to say a complete elimination of commercial aside from the daycare facility, rather a reduction, and see what kind of flexibility that provides.
So what are you asking? I'm not sure if I understood.
So in your list, you use the word elimination of commercial aside from just the daycare. But I'm just wondering if elimination is the wrong word, rather an appropriate reduction based upon market condition.
If it achieves the same result, I'm good with the change of the word.
Okay, fair enough.
And we're also including his possible other client too that would have some commercial in there. Recall that?
No, what?
As well as Joe's additional client that's going to take up some commercial space as well in building A as well.
Oh, not just daycare?
Yeah, it's not just daycare, it's also his client. Joe, am I right? Can we call him Mr. X? I don't know what we call him.
For right now, we only have one client that's and that would be the daycare.
Oh, okay. Do you want us to keep that included in the other client, or?
Well, I'm just saying, it hasn't been inked, but we've designed in over many iterations the building for his specific purpose, and so if we can make the deal go through, then I'd like to be able to include it. If not, then it's
Okay.
something.
Yeah, right now, Rob, it's just the daycare.
Right.
Yeah.
There is some space that is commercial in building A that the daycare is not initially taking, but not a lot. And certainly,
well, give us, I think maybe we're just looking at square footage in that building A right now.
Yeah. And
so
I'm not, yeah.
If
I'm
the
not
daycare
sure.
ends up taking up a smaller space, then there may be a little bit of space available for something else, but we've reduced the daycare impact. And so we would be okay with, I think, something else in that building taking up that space. But let's define what the square footage is for the daycare and try to keep it to that square footage.
Well, I mean, aren't we just finding the space for the daycare as well as his extra client?
There
is no extra client.
There is no extra. It's
There's no extra client, but we do have a footprint for this building. That there's a few extra units that would be available.
Okay, forgive me for the confusion. I wasn't understanding. So okay.
So, correction on this list. Do you want it to state eliminate commercial in building B, C, D, and look at lowering the height of the building, or do you want it to say possibly eliminate, or how did you want that worded?
I would say eliminate in B, C, and D.
I agree.
Okay.
That works.
Does that give you a good list, Joe?
Yeah, I just the rental restriction is something that's going to be potentially problematic, but I need to look into that. So.
Well, and I think Tim will agree that we'll follow council. Or am I not?
I just need to see what that looks like as far as.
We're.
Well, we can certainly, that can be a topic that we'd still discuss.
Sure.
Yeah. I just need to see what that looks like and what that does to sales and whatever. So I can agree to a number. I just want to make sure that it's a number that makes sense, that it's not.
Yeah, you won't have a problem with sales. We have other units in the city that have that limitation, and they're all sold.
Okay, very good.
And by the way, just for the planning commission to know, I issued the last certificate of occupancy on those last week. They are done.
The next question I have is, do I have a motion to table this to September 16th?
I'll make said motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. This issue is now tabled to the 16th. Thank you for everyone playing.
Thank you. Thanks, Gary, for helping us out and everyone else.
Joseph, I want to see that design. You got something.
The next thing is just run through the commission if they have any extra comments. Commissioner West,
Nothing?
Commissioner Taylor,
No.
Commissioner Tim.
No.
What the heck am I missing?
Taylor.
Commissioner Boatright.
Nope, I'm good.
The last thing I have to do is I've been reminded I have to reread the order on public meetings of the South Weaver Planning Commission as part of the record as well. You've heard this before. I, Robert Osborne, as chair of the South Weaver City Planning Commission, do hereby find and declare as follows: due to the emergency conditions which currently exist in the state of Utah and specifically Davis County, South Weaver City, as a result of COVID-19 pandemic and recent surge in COVID-19 infections across the state in Davis County, the holding of public meetings with an anchor location is defined in the Utah Open and Public Meetings Act presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location, and to the risk to those who may be present at an anchor location can be substantially mitigated by holding public meetings of the Planning Commission pursuant to electronic means that allow for public participation via virtual means. And 3, the city has the means and ability to allow virtual participation in the public meetings in accordance with the Utah Open and Public Meetings Act. Now, therefore, based upon the foregoing, after 30 days from the day of this order, meetings of the South Weaver City Planning Commission shall be conducted by virtual means without 26 August 2020. I look for a motion to close or to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
Fair say aye.
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 Thank you. Appreciate it. We'll see
Thank you.
everyone on the 10th and the 16th. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.